Call the meeting to order.
I don't know. You haven't got you up right.
Jane, will you call the roll?
Regent Bartel.
Here.
Regent Baling.
Thank you.
Regent Bradley. Regent Drew. Regent Evers. Regent Falbo. Regent Higgins.
Here.
Regent Rybar. Here. Regent Menedez.
Here.
Regent Milner. Here. Regent Pointer. Here. Regent Pruitt.
Here.
Regent Roberts. Regent Smith.
Here.
Regent Tyler. Here. Regent Vasquez.
Here.
Regent Walsh. Regent Whitburn.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everybody. It seems like a little bit since we've last met, although I've seen some of you at campus visits, football games, etc. Certainly a long time since we've been here on the 18th floor. Cute story, I was with my daughter visiting UW-Madison. She was doing a campus tour because she's hopefully going to decide to stay in Wisconsin to go to school. And the tour guide from UW-Madison, we're across the street, and he looks over at the Van Nuys building to about, 50 students and parents, and he says, "That's Van Nuys." He says, "See the top floor there?" He says, "That's where the Board of Regents have their offices. That's where they go." And he explains a little bit what the Board of Regents. He says, "The reason they want to be on the top floors there is that they can see all of the campus, to see all that's going on." I said, "Oh, that's interesting." Went on to the next spot.
So why do we keep the shades closed?
Why do we keep the shades closed? Yeah. Two items before we start. Just a reminder to speak into the microphones. We want everybody to be heard. And just so you know, so you can plan a little bit, we are going to take a 10-minute break after the first presentation today. We'll be starting out this morning with a presentation on improving student success within the UW system, led by Senior Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, Mark Nook. From then, we'll have an update on the Knowledge Powers Wisconsin strategic vision from President Riley and Dave Giroux. Finally, this morning, as part of our ongoing series of discussions with UW institutions' strategic goals, Chancellor Rick Wells, who's going to be presenting twice today, he tells me. So unusual to hear from you at Regent meetings, will bring us up to speed on UW-Oshkosh's goals and priorities. Before we proceed, President Riley would like to take the opportunity to have a few introductions.
Thank you, Regent Smith. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. It's my pleasure to introduce to the board this morning a familiar face in a new role. As of January 1st, Dr. Jackie Weisenberger. Jackie, are you with us? Yeah, there she is. Welcome. Jackie has begun serving as the interim provost and vice chancellor for academic and student affairs at UW-Stout. She previously served as associate vice chancellor in that office for about 2 years, and she's a former director of the UW-Stout School of Education. Earlier in her career, she taught high school in Illinois and served urban, suburban, and rural schools as a school psychologist in Iowa and Wisconsin. Jackie received her PhD in educational psychology with an emphasis in special education from the University of Minnesota. Jackie is a big Kansas and Minnesota sports fan, but we'll try not to hold that against her. I didn't. No, yeah, that's right. We won't hold that against her. So we want to welcome her and wish her good luck in her new role. And also with us this morning is a guest from China, who is a visitor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee this year. He's over here. This is Professor and Vice President Wang Wanshan from Zhejiang University in China. So we are very happy to have you joining us, and we hope to learn much from you, and we hope we can teach you a few things about how we do business here. Thank you.
All All right. Well, as we've already mentioned this morning, we're going to have a presentation and discussion about our efforts and record in improving student success within the UW system. This topic, in a real sense, is at the heart of what the university does, and that is to provide an educational experience that will help UW students become well-prepared, successful, engaged students. The goals we have set are significant. From our more graduates target, you all remember, of increasing the number of UW undergraduates conferred by a cumulative 80,000 degrees by 2025, to pursuing exclusive excellence, fostering greater diversity, equity, inclusion, and accountability at every level of university life. But we all know that just as important as setting these big goals is the actual work that's being done, the sweat equity that is the foundation of reaching these goals and these ideals. That's part of what we're going to talk about today, how we're measuring up when it comes to looking at the vital signs that indicate the likelihood of staying on trajectory to meet our goals. So I'll introduce, and do you have anything else, Kevin? No. We'll introduce Mark Duck. Mark.
Thank you. Hit the keyboard. Thank you. First of all, before I begin, we've chosen a title that's actually a double entendre. There's two meanings to this. One is the one that I'll talk about first. I'll actually talk about both those meanings. By improving student success within the UW system, we could mean we're going to look at the numbers and see how we are improving, and indeed that's the case. The other is, what are we doing to improve, and what are we going to do to improve student success? How are we going to go about improving student success within the UW system? And that'll be the point of both of these, of this presentation, getting to those two different meanings of the title. I want to call your attention to your packet. You have three sets of materials in there that you may want to reference. The first is a set of slides that is the presentation that we'll be going through, so you'll have those at your table. The other is a set that is entitled Data Set to Accompany Improving Student Success Within the UW System. It's copied with 2 slides per page. And that has some additional data. We've got a lot more data than I can walk through, and so I'm going to be pulling a bunch of it together, but I want you to have the basic data slides so that you can refer to them. You can feel free to ask questions about them. I do have these available. I can put them up and we can talk about them. The final document is a rather lengthy document with the bright colored face to it, cover, entitled Selected Examples of Proven, Promising, and Emerging Programs and Strategies, Strengthening Retention, Closing Equity Gaps, and Degree Attainment. Before I begin, I want to thank 2 of my colleagues and their staffs. Heather Kim, and the director of OPAR, and her staff have been instrumental in pulling the data together that are the basis for this presentation. And Vicki Washington and her staff in Equity, Diversity, and Inclusivity were absolutely vital in pulling together the selected examples, materials, and then providing the background information we'll be talking about as to how we went about or are going about improving student success within the UW system. With that, let me give you just a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do. First, I'll give just a brief background on the goals, student success goals. Then I'll give you an update on our data, and you have that data handout. We'll look at retention and graduation rates, and we're going to look at equity gaps. Then the final part of my presentation is to look at some of the system-wide efforts that we've implemented as a system, our institutions have implemented to improve student success measures and to work towards meeting our goal of 80,000 more graduates between 2009 and 2025. Following that, we'll have presentations by Renee Wachter, Chancellor at UW Superior, and Michael Lovell, Chancellor at UW-Milwaukee, on what they have, some of the things that are going on their campus to meet these goals. In addition, Rick Wells will address some of these in his presentation on strategic planning. So I felt, since we've got the Panthers, the Yellow Jackets, and the Titans here, I had to pull out my yellow and gold tie and support our chancellors just as much as I could. So with that, let's look at the little bit of background. As Regent President Smith pointed out, our overall goal is to produce 80,000 more graduates between 2010 and 2025. we're on track to do that. We had a presentation in October about where we're at. We're approximately 1,100 degrees ahead of schedule on that, so we're in good shape. However, if we just look year to year at how we're doing with degree attainment from year to year, we don't have any predictor of how we're going to continue to do on into the future. And there's some underlying data that can give us a look into how likely are we to meet our goal the next year, the year after that, or 5 or 6 years down the road. Those are our vital signs, what I'm calling our vital signs. Those are to look at our retention rate. Are we continuing to improve our retention rate? Is it on track to make sure that the students are moving through our system efficiently? Look at our 4 and 6 year graduation rates. Are those continuing to be strong, to be where we need them if we're going to meet our goal of graduating enough students to meet this goal? And finally, 2 last ones, cut our equity gaps in half. As our student body becomes more and more diverse, both racially and economically, it's important that we watch these and continue to improve the success rates of both our economically challenged students and those students who come from historically underrepresented minority groups. Finally, we need to watch our enrollments. In October of this past year at UW-Stout, we looked at those enrollments and we saw that while our enrollments are about a little bit higher than they were last year, and they're above anything in the past decade, they are about 3,800 students behind our targets. So there's a little bit of a concern around some of our enrollments. But we will look today mostly at the retention rates, the graduation rates, and our equity gaps. And these 3 measures are also important measures of our efficiency. How well are we doing at helping our students attain their degrees? So looking at our retention and 4 and 6 year graduation rates, I'm not going to put up all of our data. There's a lot of different slides we could look at, and we would be here all morning trying to walk through each of those slides. So I've taken that data and pulled it together, and here are the real results. With our retention rates, for new freshman retention rates, we're on target. We're at about 80.2. We were hoping to be at 80.5, so we're within 0.3 of a percentage point. We are also a full percentage point ahead of the national average. So we're in pretty good shape as a system. One of the concerns with this rate is that it has been static over the last several years. It isn't moving upward. It's holding pretty steady. Our transfer students are also, we're ahead of target with them as far as retention rate goes. Our 4-year graduation rates look really good compared to the target. They're up by 1 percentage point above our target at 29%. Transfer students are up 3 percentage points above their target. This, however, is a place where we're not so good when we look at the national averages. We're running the national average for the new freshmen is at 31.4%. So we're around 2.5 percentage points below the national average. However, that gap has been closing over the last few years. We're getting closer and closer to it. When you take a look at our individual institutions as well, what we find is that many of our institutions, compared to peers with similar student body makeups, all of our institutions look pretty good in terms of their retention rate and their 6-year graduation rates. Where we typically run a little bit low is in the 4-year graduation rate. So this is an area that we need to spend a little time focusing on. The nice thing about our 4-year graduation rate, especially for new freshmen, is we've shown consistent growth in that area. We're growing over the last 7 years at a rate of about 0.5 percentage point per year. So it's pretty significant increases in that 4-year graduation rate. So we have programs in place that are working to move towards our goal and to actually beat it and meet the national average. 6-year graduation rates are also on track. The new freshmen stand at 59.6, about 0.3 of a percentage point below our target. Transfer students are above target by nearly 2 percentage points. We also stand 3 full percentage points above the national average. We also see positive growth in our 6-year graduation rate. So we're on track to continue to meet our goals. And all of these point to a healthy environment where we are moving towards better efficiency in graduating our students, retaining our students, and a high likelihood of meeting our goals in terms of degree production. Turning to look at some of the equity gaps, and I'll explain those in just a little bit. But first I want to look at what how the makeup of our university is changing. In this slide, we're looking at the makeup of our freshman class, our new entering students as freshmen. And the dark blue panels here are students who are members of, who are not members of the historically underrepresented minority groups and are also not eligible for Pell Grants. The dark red areas are students who are also not members of historically underrepresented minorities, but are Pell eligible students. Well, you can see that group is growing as a percentage of the freshman class quite rapidly. It's moved from 14% of the class to 20% of the class. The light blue area are those students who are members of underrepresented minorities and are not Pell eligible. That group has only changed from 3% to 5% of the freshman class. The group that's changed the most are those students who are underrepresented, members of historically underrepresented minority groups and are Pell eligible, and they've moved from 3% to 8%. Regent Higgins?
Very happy the numbers look good, but to what extent are these increases demographic artifacts as opposed to actual results of efforts that we've been making?
I think what we're seeing is faster growth in our underrepresented minority students than we are seeing changes in the demographics. Right? So we're getting a bigger and bigger piece. And this is being done primarily with increases amongst Hispanic and Native American, primarily Hispanic students within the state, where the growth is the greatest. The percentage of high school students that graduate from public schools in Wisconsin that come to our state, we're seeing growth in that percentage amongst the Hispanic students and the Native American students. The others are holding relatively flat, both white students, Asian students, and then also the African American students are holding relatively flat as a percentage of the high school graduates that show up at a UW institution. Yeah. What this chart really shows us is that our university is becoming more and more diverse. Economically, notice the large growth in the number of students, the percentage of students who are here on Pell Grants. That would be looking at those students in the red and pink areas. Those are where the most growth is occurring. We are also, though, becoming more diverse ethnically and racially. We're seeing large growth, and that is in the two sort of light shadowed areas, the pink and the light blue. So we as an institution are becoming much more diverse economically and racially. And it's important then that we make sure that all of our students are being moved through this system, are receiving the education they should in a timely and efficient manner. We must pay attention to any gaps in equity we have in the way that we serve and are able to reach degree attainment for the different populations of our students. So let's look at how we're doing with that. We've looked at, traditionally in our numbers, we look at splitting this into two groups, our underrepresented minority students, and see how they're doing compared to non-underrepresented minority students. And what we see is that this gap in retention rate has been reduced, and we're on track to actually meet our target of cutting that in half by 2015, cutting that gap. And I'll show you this particular data in the next slide of the retention rate for the underrepresented minority and how that's going. The gap in six-year graduation rate has also declined, but the decline isn't really significant. We've gone from 23 percentage points, that is the six-year graduation rate of non-underrepresented minorities compared to those students who are in the underrepresented minorities. Was at 23%, we've cut it to 21%. Of course, our target is around 11 to 12%. So we've got a ways to go. It's important to keep in mind that this one's going to be more difficult to move. It has a longer timeline. You can't move the six-year graduation rate in a year. Those students, many of those students that when we started this program are just starting to get to that six-year graduation point. 2015 is actually the year that those students who started in 2009, the first year of this, hit the six-year graduation rate. So you wouldn't necessarily expect to see big changes in this yet, but it is some cause for some concern. The Pell Grant recipients, these all increase. That's not such good news. It has a lot to do with the economy. I think it has, in particular with the graduation rates, has a lot to do with some tuition increases that we're seeing in 2005 and 6 and 7. And we can see that in their retention rates. Almost all of the decline in the graduation rate for our Pell-eligible students or Pell recipients occurred in the last 2 years. And those are students who started in 2005 and 2006. And we really almost dared these students to finish. They are Pell-eligible. They're at economic risk. They're the students in 2005 and 6. They came in 5. They saw first-year tuition increases in 2006 and 2007 that were above 10%. And we saw retention impacts on both of those groups. They're also the students that had to survive and get to graduation during the 2008 economic downturn. So in reality, and to some extent, we did sort of dare them to finish. And they're doing a reasonably good job at it. One of the things that I think is important to point out, and it's not on this slide and it's not in your packet, but if we disaggregate this a little bit, we look instead of just at how are underrepresented students doing compared to non-underrepresented, and how are Pell Grant doing compared to Pell Grant. But we pull it apart, and we look at retention rates based on what I would call a racial equity gap, or a diversity equity gap. What I mean by doing that is take those students who are not Pell eligible, put them in a group, and now split them into those that are members of the underrepresented minority group and those that are non-underrepresented minority. And look at what's happened to their retention rate and their graduation. What we find is that we have cut that equity gap in half. We've met our goal. If you also take that group of students who are non-Pell eligible and split them in the same way, and you look at their retention rate, we've cut that in half too. So by retention rates, we really have already met our goal if you take into account the economic factors as well as the racial. You look at the 6-year graduation rate, we're moving those closer and closer as well. We're on track to actually meet our goal when you separate them out and remove the economic impact from them. When we look at the other, looking at economic equity, so now we take all the students who are not members of underrepresented minorities, and then we split them by whether or not they're Pell or not Pell eligible, and look at their retention rates, their 6-year graduation rates, their 4-year graduation rates. Those are all widening. I think the economy that we've moved through is a big piece of that. We're seeing the stress in our Pell eligible students much more so than our non-Pell eligible. Okay. That's some complicated data to display. I've got the slide if you want to see it later. But it does show that many of our programs that we have put in place to reduce the, especially the diversity equity gaps, are paying off, and we've gotten to the midway point. Thanks. So let's look at sort of the data that we do use for this. And what we plot and what you can see here is the retention rate, second-year retention rate for underrepresented minority students and non-underrepresented minority students. The purple line at the top is our non-underrepresented minority students. That's very, very stable and consistent at 80%. And the retention rate then for our underrepresented minority students is in green, and you can see it fluctuates a little bit more. And you'll see that this dip is around 2005 and 6 I talked about earlier. That's the students that got hit with some pretty big tuition increases. And this is just retention rate, so the 2008 won't affect that particular group. You can see, though, that in 2005, as we started to implement our various diversity plans, we have closed, at least narrowed, that retention equity gap. Looking a little bit at what's happened with the economic piece, the Pell and non-Pell, the blue line, again, are students who are not Pell eligible, and the red line is for those who are. And you can see that the gap has widened, and that all the widening occurred for the 2005 and 6 group. Again, this group that faced some large tuition increases and had to survive through the 2008 economic difficulties.
Mark, could
Yes.
you go back one chart?
Sure. This one?
We got 8% in 02, we got 8% in 11.
Mm-hmm.
What's realistic target?
I think, from my perspective, what we're trying to do is cut this in half. So we'd like to go from the 11% here down to 5 to 6%. There's always going to be some variability in these. We're never going to see it absolutely go close. What I would like to see, personally, is that we're always within a few, perhaps 5 percentage points in these two indicators. I'd like to see them cross every once in a while, right? So that we don't see it always running 5% below or 2% below, but that in fact, over a period of time, they're sort of working back and forth within a 5 percentage point gap. That's personal. We haven't really talked about that as a system, what's reasonable. But we can clearly close it. We've got it down. We're closing in on 5%, and 5% is actually our target by 2015.
Thank you.
This one in particular, actually, this one is not as it's not as dependent on the economy as this one is. Okay, when we start to look at Pell and non-Pell, the economy is going to affect that a lot more. Now, what have we been doing as a system to move these numbers? And we have really implemented 4 key strategies. One of them is LEAP, Liberal Education in America's Promise, that talks about essential learning outcomes, high-impact practices, and assessment. Inclusive Excellence, which is the university's umbrella strategy for improving diversity, all types of diversity. And then within Inclusive Excellence, we've implemented the climate study and the equity scorecard. I'll give you a little background on each of those. First of all, looking at LEAP, or Liberal Education in America's Promise, there are 4 key areas of this. This is a national program. It was set up and is sort of managed by the American Association of Colleges and Universities, AAC&U. We were the first LEAP state. We started in 2005. In fact, we were a pilot before LEAP actually existed, and have really helped set the agenda for this. AAC&U worked with business leaders and with education leaders to develop a set of essential learning outcomes that employers need all of our students to have, and that we believe all of our students need if they're to be successful, not just professionally, but personally and as community leaders and community members. And these really are the guiding principles of a liberal education. They're the things we hear about when we talk to business partners. They include students that have critical thinking skills, creative thinking skills, that are able to read and write and communicate effectively, and know something about working in teams, know how to do that, and are culturally aware and able to work with diverse populations, as more and more of our businesses rely on a diverse population to be effective in their business practices. Within this, we also have the high-impact practices, and we'll talk just a little bit about those. What are there are ways that we can better engage students in their education, make them more effective in reaching their learning goals. It's also important that we assess those learning goals, and we know that our students are coming out with the skills that we're expecting them to have. And then embedded in liberal education in America's Promise is also that we have to educate all of our students, inclusive excellence. And that the more students that we have, the more diverse our student body is, the better education that all of our students receive. With that, let me move into inclusive excellence and talk just a little bit about it. It has a 3-pronged strategy. One is to achieve compositional diversity in both the student body and the employment body, faculty, staff, administration. Second is to make sure that we have a climate and culture that serves all of our employees and all of our students. And then to achieve equity in the outcomes, whether that's for faculty and staff pay and tenure and promotion. And for students, it might be retention rates, graduation rates, the awarding of honors, academic and other honors, community service honors. Together, these 3 strategies would lead us towards an environment that is inclusive of all people and that works to make sure that they all succeed in an equitable manner. Within inclusive excellence, there are some guiding principles. I won't go through each of these. As you can see, as you work through this, it's really about making this part of the core mission of our universities and making sure that we pay attention to issues of diversity, both racial and ethnic and economic and really any other form of diversity, making sure that we can serve all of our students. And down here, the second bullet up, the implementation matters as much as the strategy. We have to see results, and we have to track those results if we're going to see them. So within Inclusive Excellence, we're developing ways to actually follow how well we're doing at meeting goals for all of our students. One of the ways that we're doing this is a process known as the Equity Scorecard. This was developed by Dr. Estella Ben-Simone at the Center for Urban Education at the University of South Carolina. She worked with institutions throughout the country. All of our institutions have participated in the Equity Scorecard at some level, and this is a way of helping our institutions, one, figure out how they need to look at their data to be able to help all students and serve all students, and then put into place processes that will better serve them so that we can reach our equity and degree attainment goals for all of our students. It's important in this work to disaggregate the data, not just look at underrepresented versus non-underrepresented, but to look at what's happening with our African American populations, what's happening with our Native American populations, our Hispanic populations, our Asian populations, and our non-underrepresented minority populations. To look at that at the university level and to look at it at the program level as well. There's an example in the large document, the examples of selected examples document, where UW-Eau Claire looked closely at its honors program and found that the way that they were selecting students, the process they had put in place for students to enter that program, really limited the ability for underrepresented minorities to be engaged in a key process, activity on their campus, the honors program. And by making some changes, they've been able to improve not just the diversity of students in that program, but the ability of diverse students to participate fully within their university. And it's written up in your selected examples document. The Campus Climate Survey is run by Sue Rankin at Penn State, and all of our institutions have also moved through the climate survey. And if you remember, one of the three-pronged strategies of inclusive excellence is to create a climate that is conducive for all cultures and all backgrounds and all students and faculty to thrive. And the climate survey is about coming in through surveys, being able to determine some of the things that might be inhibiting an open and inclusive environment on a particular campus and throughout the system. All of our institutions have received their reports now on the campus climate, and we're waiting and should receive the system-wide report for Dr. Rankin in the next couple of months. So I hope to be able to report back to you on what is in that report at a later date. With that, let me pause, and I would be happy to take questions, but I would also, we've got two other speakers, Dr. Wachner and Dr. Lovell. So any quick questions, and we can move then to the other presenter. Okay. All right.
Good morning. I think you're going to get the system sandwich today, which is the smallest institution and next to Madison, the largest institution, talking about student success. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we know about retention and the kinds of things that we're doing both to improve retention and to improve our graduation rates. Some are things we've been doing quite a while and are very successful. Some are things that we've just started taking a look at and are hoping to have some good results. So I want to kind of take a step back and say, what do we know about student retention? Because as a campus, we've been really immersing ourselves in the literature and in best practice, particularly over the summer as we were leading into the fall semester. And this is what we've come to learn based on the studies that are out there, nearly 2 decades of research. One is that there is no magic bullet. There's not going to be one solution that's going to solve all of our ills on all of our campuses with all of our students. Different types of students are going to require different kinds of interventions, and the kinds of things that we've been investing in, like learning communities and tutoring services, are all worthwhile, but not one of them is going to be the answer, including things like freshman seminars. So keep that in mind as we're going through these presentations. using multiple strategies are going to result in the greatest impact. And sometimes you're not always going to be able to identify which one of those things individually is going to make the greatest impact. It can be the confluence, especially when you're talking about things that are contributing to campus climate. We know that our students' demographics create challenges, and just to pull some national data about what that impact is going to look like and why our campuses are so different. If you look at a public research institution, the latest data coming out of the Educational Advisory Board would show that the average retention rates on campuses like this with the student profile that they get are somewhere, the lowest, or the 25th percentile would be 84%, the 75th percentile would be 93%. Pretty good, pretty high. The graduation rates at those types of institutions, 63% on the 25th percentile, 79% on the 75th percentile. Again, pretty good. However, when you go all the way down to what institutions would be considered inclusive, you know, taking the widest possible body of students, public masters, 6-year graduation rates on average, the lowest 25th percentile would be 31%, highest 75th percentile is 40%. For retention, 61% at the 25th percentile and 73% at the 75th percentile. That's quite a spread. And again, I think that's a recognition of a lot of different factors that we've talked about today. So the expectation that all of our institutions are going to be at the same place, the data would show us otherwise. We'll talk a little bit about what superior looks like. We do think that for the kind of profile of students that we get, that we do have an advantage, and particularly because of our size and the kind of climate that we can create with individual attention that's a little bit different than on some other campuses. So what does our student look like? You came up most of you were there for the inauguration, so you have a chance to kind of picture this as you're seeing some of the pictures. But we have a high, when we talk about Pell, financial aid, we have a high number of students that have need and receive some kind of financial aid, 87%. That's a huge percentage of the campus. 46% of these students have Pell grants. So we talk about the impact of Pell on retention and for them to be able to afford college. This is definitely important. 50% of our students overall are first generation, 46% of our incoming class were first generation. We have a large number of non-traditional students. Nearly 30% of our undergraduates are over the age of 24. And on campus, that constitutes 19%. The rest are distance learning students. So when you talk about non-traditional students who are supporting families and coming in perhaps on a part-time basis or on a much more reduced credit hour basis because they're juggling lots of things, you need to think about what does that 4-year, 6-year graduation rate really look like? Do we need to re-examine the metric? And we have the highest number of transfer students, which means a couple of things. Number one, they come into, they're not there enculturated from the very beginning into the campus climate, but we also know that they have some experience under their belt and they're actually much more likely to get out the door when they come in. I want to talk about our campus commitment because this year, 2012, really was the year of retention. We did a lot of work over the summer. Not so much that we weren't meeting our gaps, although you'll see that there are some gaps, but we think that we want definitely to improve overall what we're doing with recruitment and retention. So our whole enhancement day kicking off the fall semester was devoted to this topic. We brought in Matt Pellish from EAB, the Educational Advisory Board. He was our keynote speaker. We talked about national trends. We talked about things that seemed to be working and not working. We had breakout sessions for the faculty. The level of buzz of conversation was amazing. This is a campus that is devoted to making students succeed. We also learned that we had some groups on campus that were maybe stymied, some overlap in what was happening in terms of committee assignments, accountability, responsibility, and we worked to clarify that. And we commissioned a particular study to look at advising practices because we think that that's one of the areas that we can improve in. These are the results of the work over the summer. We actually did some reorganization in-house. We created a student success team, and that's to create that holistic, get those people talking that have responsibility for that holistic student experience. first-year seminar, first-year experience, career services, advising, and multicultural, and our tutoring center. All of those are now together as the student success team. We realigned our vice chancellors. We actually have our vice chancellor of Campus Life now reporting to academic affairs. And we know that that piece that happens outside of the classroom is just as important that happens inside the classroom, and those two, especially on a campus like ours, need to be very tightly integrated. So we've actually opened lines of communication by doing some restructuring. Student Enrollment and Retention Committee is focused on best practice. We'll talk about what some of those best practices are. We brought in one of our peers in a neighboring area that has been very successful with retention, so that when we started this semester, we had a 30, 60, 90-day action plan going into this semester. And we've expanded how we're recruiting our student body. So let's talk about what is working. We're really actually very proud of what's happening with our recruitment efforts. For our international student count, if we're talking about the compositional diversity on the campus, 161 new international students coming from 37 different countries. This is the third highest class of students that we've had coming in. And we've got some other things in the works that I'll talk about that will, I think, help maintain those numbers, if not increase them. We had 243 students of color. It's the highest number ever on our campus. That's over 8% of our campus student body now. That's underrepresented minorities. So we've made some great strides, considering that when we started, we really didn't have a number to report. Most recently, we've been focused on two areas. One is achievement in STEM, and so we received a grant that kicked off this fall that's encouraging underrepresented minorities in STEM programs. And then we received, most recently this fall, a $1.2 million Department of Education grant to train Native American teachers. And our numbers here are very strong. It was actually a byproduct of a visit we had to one of the reservations. Got into a conversation. They were looking for a grant partner, and off we went. Let's talk about some of the activities that we think are particularly successful. We do high school senior days where students are on the campus. We do junior days where students are on the campus. The one most recently this fall that we thought was very effective is we worked with high school integration specialists and homeschool liaisons at the tribes and in the surrounding region to bring students to campus. It was the first time we had done this, and it was really an overwhelming success for us. We do college student for a day. We have minority student days on campus as well. We've really beefed up our visits to our region, leveraging, kind of rearranging how we're doing our visit schedules. We do junior nights, and then we're most recently signed a contract to have an English as a second language and ESL program on campus, which should help also increase the number of international students that we have on campus. In terms of retention, we're doing a good job first to second year. It's amazing, and especially with underrepresented minorities. In the past, we've had zero gap. We've had positive gaps, 2% gaps. So that, you know, that number, if you talk about random error, random fluctuation, it would be within your control chart limits. It was 1% last year. So we're doing a really fabulous job keeping our students on the campus. In fact, when our numbers have been higher, we've been in the 80s, into mid-80s in terms of our American Indian retention. Our student athletes, we know, retain at a higher rate with actually a higher graduation GPA. And part of that reason, when we talk about the importance of climate, that's what does it. We do a Circle of Native American Student Organization. First Nation Studies has a physical space. We do a lot of inclusion at ceremonies. We always have drum ceremonies, artwork displays in our gallery that's Native American oriented. We have a spirit pole on campus. All those kinds of things go to influence climate. Pell is where we're seeing the problem, especially this last year. We had a pretty large blip of about 10%, which means that our students are really struggling financially, and that kind of echoes what Mark was saying about the economic conditions and the impact it has on our students. Some of the other things that are working as we're talking about campus and campus climate, our Multicultural Center, we have a peer mentoring program. That's been fairly effective. We do a lot of personal contact, and that's one of the things that's very hard to measure. We're on Facebook, we're on social media, creating all of these dynamic interchanges with our students. We have recognitions of achievement. We've been very proactive in terms of analyzing enrollment trends. So we'll do, for instance, an analysis at the beginning of every semester that looks at the number of students who are not registering. That sets off a red flag. They're either in with a mandatory counseling session, and one of the other things we do is to look at holds that might be on a student's record. We don't want a small dollar amount preventing a student from registering for the semester. You might say, well, how big is this problem? We had 766 students this last semester that hadn't registered because of some kind of hold. Some of it was just they hadn't done certain paperwork that they have to agree to when they come to the institution, but we had an awful large number of those students, somewhere close to 350 that had a $300 hold. That was something we don't want to prevent them from registering. So really getting an early look at what's happening with students who are enrolling or not enrolling. And then our high-impact practices we know make a difference. We'll see anywhere from a 5 to a 14% increase in our retention efforts when we do things like the first-year seminar. We know that students that study abroad have a retention rate in the 80s. We know that for our transfer students that do a study abroad, they have a retention rate in the 90s. So having those high-impact, high-involvement kinds of activities does make a difference. So I painted a pretty rosy picture. What do we need to work on? Well, we've done a good job first year to second year. We've done second to third pretty well. But it's that third and fourth year momentum, keeping that energy going as these students are going through. We know that we still see gaps for both Pell and underrepresented minorities in terms of graduation. So what are we doing to address this? One is these are some of our strategies that are in progress. We are looking very hard at figuring out what data do we need to answer the important questions about retention and moving through. We know, for instance, and what the Education Advisory Board will tell you is that two things matter. One is proactive and early identification, because these students that are in trouble typically will not self-identify. They're not the ones that are going to be coming to have resources. And the second is management of the follow-up. So it's not just making that initial contact, but how are you going back repeatedly to make sure that that student stays on track. So it's less about new resources than it is about utilizing resources that we already have existing on the campus. For instance, things like change of major typically might be a signal. We know that you get almost a year's difference in graduation rate when a student changes a major, depending on how many times they change. So flagging things like that we think are important. Progress in these gateway courses, making sure that they stay on track, is something that we've begun to measure. And we're also handing out retention reports now to our various academic departments by major so that they all have an idea of where their students stand in terms of retention. We're broadening the HIPs. Our first-year seminar went into effect, campus-wide mandatory for the first time this fall. We're significantly trying to expand our undergraduate research programs. And financial aid analysis. We have limited dollars to spend on financial aid. How are we making the best use of those dollars and doing some modeling to make sure that if there's emergency loans that are going to make the difference, that we have the volume of loans in place? How are we allocating our scholarships dollars to encourage retention? So taking a much more hard-nosed look at where those dollars go and where they seem to be the most effective. Our student success team is that new team that we pulled together. And we talk about underutilization of resources. We have an early warning system called the ASSIST system. So students seem to be in trouble and having problems. Faculty can flag them in this system and there'll be a follow-up meeting. Well, we realized this summer that was one of the resources that was really severely underutilized. Faculty were not reporting necessarily when a student was having a problem. So we went on a awareness campaign. We quadrupled the number of reports of students in the system. Our retention rate for those students that were flagged and responded to follow-up were 9 out of 10. So having that resource out there and making sure it was used is important. We're redoing our advising model to include things what we call appreciative advising. sounds kind of touchy-feely, but it's not. It's really talking more holistically with the student about what challenges they're facing, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, because all of that makes up the picture of whether or not they're going to succeed. We're developing an at-risk student profile to see if there's correlations in some of the demographics or preparation or even some of the schools that they're coming out of, so we can bring that feedback back. We have mandatory meetings with all of our students that are on probation and suspension so that they're receiving intervention. And we're beefing up our financial orientation for freshmen. It's something that we've always done, but it's going to be a much longer component and a much more in-depth component, so that when students are taking on debt, they have some understanding of what it is that they're taking on. And finally, we're engaging our parents as partners. We think that, especially for our full-time freshmen, that family support is important. And so letting parents know when students are having major events going on in their life, whether that's midterm exams, leading up to finals, final exams, so that they've got some understanding of what their student is going through and can make some intervention. We see this as a critical part of our strategic plan, and we're going to kick this off this April after our Higher Learning Commission visit. And we've got teams right now that are gathering data. The formal kickoff will begin in April, and by March the following year, we'll be able to present what our strategic plan looks like. And I can guarantee you that student retention is going to be a big part of that. So I'm happy to answer questions or wait until...
Chancellor, Roger Axtell, who used to sit on this board, was good at explaining almost anything to anybody, anywhere in the world. And he talked about the system as this crown of jewels. And Mark Nook showed us the entire crown, and it sparkles, and generally speaking, we look pretty good. But you wouldn't look at a diamond and compare it to a ruby if you wanted to figure out what quality of diamond was. So let's say that UW-Superior is on that crown and it's a sapphire, so you'd only really understand UW-Superior if you compared it to another sapphire. So if there were 20 people like you who had institutions like UW-Superior, how do you think you compare with those other institutions?
We've actually used two benchmarks. One is this national data that I just talked about, and we're about average. We're right in the middle for both our retention numbers and for our graduation numbers. But we're also trying to raise the bar. We think that, and if we compare ourselves to COPLAC institutions, we're probably somewhere in the middle as well. But we know we've seen peers that we don't necessarily benchmark about that have a similar student profile that we think that we can make some inroads, and especially I think with the academic side of the house in terms of looking at gateways and milestones. We're ambitious enough that we want more for our students than staying in the middle of the pack.
All right. Mark? Or who? Chancellor Lovell?
Okay, well, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to address you, and it was amazing. You know, Renee and I did not rehearse anything. We didn't know what each other were going to talk about. It's amazing how similar some of the things we're going to say are, even though our institutions are so different. And I just want to reiterate what she said, that there's not any silver bullet for solving the student success problems or issues that we face on our campuses. And I think it's really important to provide a context about how every university in our system is so different. And when you think about Superior and Milwaukee, could you think of two other institutions where they're located in the side of institutions that could be more different than two of us, and understanding that some of the issues that we face on our campus, obviously Renee wouldn't have on her campus and vice versa, but there's also some similarities as well. And I think when you think about Milwaukee, we are extremely unique in the system. When the Board of Regents came up with our mission, they actually gave us a threefold mission. We're the only one in the system. And the first is, we're unique, is we're the access institution of the system. You know, we directly, in our charge by the board, was to provide high-quality learning opportunities to state of Wisconsin residents that is open to everyone. We also have a research mission. We're a research-intensive university. Other than Madison, we're the only one in the system. And finally, because of our unique location in the urban center of the state, we also have a mission, third part of our mission, that serves the regional needs, actually reaching out and forming partnerships with the greater community of Milwaukee. And because of kind of where we're located and who we're serving, we also have some uniqueness in terms of our socioeconomic status of our student population. For families applying for financial aid, this is the data you can actually obtain about the income levels of your students and their families. Our average students for financial aid, their families had a median income of about $60,000. The system average is $75,000. In Madison is almost $100,000. And one of the reasons why this is very important to understand is that almost all of our students work. Many of them work 30 or more hours a week. Many of them have 2 jobs, not even 1 job. And so that, again, that creates a different dynamic for a student population that has a lot of time off campus that they are doing other things and preparing for their studies. Similar to Renee, we have a very high group of students that are Pell eligible. I believe we probably have the 2 highest percentage-wise in the system. If you look at the system average, is 34%, in Madison at 17%. So, again, this creates some interesting challenges and shows kind of the demographics of where our students come from and what they do. Another thing that's interesting about UW-Milwaukee in the fall 2012 report, for the 8th straight year, we enroll more Wisconsin residents than any other state, any other university in the system. We have about 26,000 Wisconsin residents currently on our campus or attending courses on our campus. And so, again, I think that we are doing a lot to try to bring more out-of-state international students, but we still are really the ones serving more residents within the state. Again, we want to talk about the uniqueness. Not only is our student population from the state, but it's a very diverse population. Our freshman class this year had about 28% from underrepresented groups, and it's one of the fastest. The underrepresented students are fastly growing. Another thing that's growing extremely fast is our veteran population. And again, the reason why I bring this up is that I think you all understand that we have a very diverse set of students where one set of students might need different needs than another. And for example, the fact that actually in the fall 2012 we have about 1,240 veterans on our campus. And we understand that veterans' needs would be different than a traditional freshman coming in and living in our dormitories. And we by far serve the most veterans of any system institution. And a very interesting question was just brought up, and kind of it's very important that we think about the system. I believe our retention and graduation rates are lower, are among the lowest. I think only Parkside's lower than us in the system. But it's important to not compare us to all the institutions. All the institutions are different in the system, and so it's very important to compare apples to apples. So when we look at our peers, where do we stack up for the 6-year graduation rate? We're right in the middle. As Renee said, she was right in the middle of her peer group. We're right in the middle of our peer group. You see that some institutions do a little bit better than we do. Some do worse. But this is really the starting point as we talk about how we retain and graduate students at 40% graduation, 6-year graduation rate. And I think it's important to look at the IPAD definition, the national definition of these 6-year graduation rates. Renee talked about transfer students as an example. She has the highest percentage of transfer students on our campus. We have the most transfer students in the system in our campus. And if a student transfers, say from Madison to Superior, Madison, Milwaukee, and they graduate from our institution, we cannot count those students towards our 6-year graduation rate. And again, so because we have so many transfers, that number is misleading. I also want to just point out some things that also can be misleading about whether we're successful or not in those retention and graduation rates. I'd like to just share a story of one of our graduates in May 2012, a gentleman named Jay Clipp. He started his education back in 2000. So he had a 12-year journey to graduate. And he was in the Marine Corps Reserves, and he had to go do a tour in Iraq, so he put it on hold. When he came back, he decided he wanted to save some money, so he worked 4 years in a bank. And then he returned to college, and he graduated last May. And one of the great things about him is he was a true entrepreneur. He started his own business. He's got a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym. He's a professional cage fighter, so he makes money cage fighting, and he also uses creative writing degree to do freelance writing for a website called U.S. Combat Sports. Now, from the iPad definition, this guy would be considered a failure. But for us, we consider him to be a great success. And so I just think we just need to keep this in context.
Does he also play the clarinet?
I'm not sure. I'll let you ask him that. I'm not sure I'd want to.
We'll put you in the cage with him.
Yeah. Yeah. He may have been able to help a little earlier today. So what we have we've decided to take an aggressive goal. We know we're at 40% now for our 6-year graduation rates. If we look at our peer institutions, which I showed a few slides ago, we would be in the top quartile if we can get to 50% 6-year graduation rate, which is we have decided to make an aggressive goal by the year 2017. And we've already implemented a number of high-impact practices to get there over the last 5 years. And we're really focusing on 3 areas: focusing on scholarships, specific retention programs, and really better engaging students of color. And one thing that I mentioned earlier is that we have so many students that work, 30 hours or so a week on our campus, that we have found that one of the best ways to help them be successful is to provide scholarship opportunities for them, so they can either not have to work or only work 1 job instead of 2. And when you meet the mortgage scholars, we have more mortgage scholars on our campus than any other institution, and when I meet those students, they all talk about how much more successful they are able to be because the scholarship allows them not to work as much and be off of campus. And during our last capital campaign, we raised about $29 million for student scholarships. It was an important part. We're getting ready to launch a new campaign on our campus, and we are calling it a Student First campaign because the #1 priority for raising funds on our next campaign will be for student scholarships. And one of the great things about this is that when we interviewed our top 40 donors about what they wanted to give for, the #1 thing that donors now want to give for are student scholarships, because they want to keep the cost of education down for students in this new times, and are worried about student debt. So this aligns really well. So we think that by raising more money for scholarships, that is one way we can really help with the retention of our students. As Renee pointed out, we've done a lot of research on how to better retain students, particularly in urban institutions like ours. And following best practices, we've done things like first-year transitional courses, kind of freshman seminar type things. We've gotten that up to about 56% participation by our freshmen. Formal mentoring programs. Again, the last 5 years when we started these programs, we've gone from 3.8% participation to 67.5%. So our students are taking advantage of the mentoring programs we have. Supplemental instruction that they can get. Again, we've had from 2.9 to 25% participation. So the students are enrolling in these activities. Tutoring, more than double the number of students that are coming in and take advantage of our tutoring programs. And part of this is really helping our students. We're really advertising and making our students aware when they come in that they have these services on our campus that are provided to them. We've also started living learning communities. These are communities in the dormitories on our campus where students have like interests, can live together and share common experiences. We didn't have any 5 years ago. We have now 16% of our student population is participating in this. Another thing that I think is really critical that we can offer in Milwaukee is formal internship opportunities. We have more than 60,000 companies in the private sector in the 7-county region around Milwaukee. That means that there are 2 private companies for every student on our campus. Finding them internship opportunities is something we should be able to help them doing. So we have taken all the internship in the schools and colleges, we're centralizing them and really helping our students find these internship opportunities. Providing more service learning opportunities. These students, we find, are very interested in reaching out and working with the community and finding ways for them to use their talents to help with the greater Milwaukee area is another way that we, once they become engaged, to retain them better. Another thing is, we have 15% of our students now do undergraduate research on our campus. Over 4,000 students. Again, students that take part in these activities, we know that their retention is higher, and this has, all been in the last 5 years we've started these programs. And finally, again, I mentioned before that the fastest growing population on our campus are underrepresented groups, and so it's very important for us to address, how we help students of color be more successful on our campus. In 2006, the campus launched a Access to Success initiative that specifically focused on helping students of color be more successful on our campus. And I can't really go through all the details of that. It would take too long. But it's specifically focused on the needs of students of color and what would help them be more successful on campus. And I'm very happy to say that since we implemented the program, we've seen a 16% increase in the first-year retention rate of these students. So now there's just a minimal, less than 1% difference between students of color on our campus retention the first year and students not of color. So these programs, Access really has been working, particularly in that first-year retention. We also are working on specialized programs with our partners within the community. For example, Northwestern Mutual, we have programs where they provide scholarships for minority students, but also provide a life mentor. So one of their employees actually mentors the students that they provide the scholarships to. There's several other programs with Harley-Davidson, Rockwell, and others that we have similar programs with. And another thing that's very important we're finding is we are really partnering with the K-12 community. I myself am a co-chair on the board of the three major organizations in Milwaukee. Milwaukee Succeeds, which is a Cradle to Career initiative to help students retain students that get lost in the pipeline any part there. The Milwaukee Partnership Academy, who's come and talked to the Regents in the past. I'm on the board, which is really focused on helping MPS students get up when they graduate, be college ready. And finally, the Milwaukee Communities Initiative between MPS, MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and UWM to really help students become math ready so they do not need remediation when they come into our doors. And we believe that by doing these initiatives, both myself and folks in our education school, that if we can help students be prepared and not take remedial courses linked to our campus, they'll be much more successful. So that just gives a snapshot, I think, of the things we're trying to do on our campus. I think we would all agree that the 40% graduation rate that we've seen is not where we want to be. We want to continue to improve that. But I think that we have implemented a lot of things that will help us move the needle in the right direction. I hope if I do get the opportunity to report back on where we are in terms of our goal of 50%, that I'll be able to say some positive things.
Thank you, Mike. Renee?
We have time for questions for any of the people that presented, but also other chancellors. Feel free to comment on programs and questions that you'd have. So
let me start with a question on the four-year graduation rate. Hear a little more interest on that and the other end of State Street. Here, when I talk to parents, primarily because of the cost, I think Mark indicated we're still behind our peers, but we're doing better. Can you two comment on how the four-year graduation rate is going at your institutions, what you're doing to hopefully increase that number? Or?
We are on track for the four-year graduation rate, but some of the things that we're doing include streamlining the curriculum, making sure that we've got the degree progress, watching the change of major alerts, having students we've got a degree map program that shows students what they need to take, when they need to take it, making sure they're putting their data in and using the system. Those are the kinds of things that we're doing to try to make sure that at least the full-time freshmen coming in, that they are thinking about getting out in 4 years as opposed to 4 and 5 years.
Thanks.
So one of the challenges we have, I think many institutions have, is with the four-year graduation rate is actually providing access to the students to all the classes they need to graduate. Sometimes they can't get in. And so one of the major initiatives we have on our campus is really a digital futures initiative where we're trying to develop more online and technology-based courses so students don't actually have to physically be in the classroom to get credits for their courses. And we are now to the point now where 1 in 4 of our students are taking at least one online course during the semester. So I describe there's students that now are living in our dormitories instead of going to class at 10 o'clock. They sit in the dorm and take the class online. But it's because we can provide more options for them or greater amounts of opportunities for them to take the classes they need to graduate.
Richard Whitburn.
Renee, I thought I heard you say change the major at a year.
So the national data says that The average graduation rate is like 5.1 years. That's with one, that's no change of major. Every time they change a major, you're successively adding on the time that it takes a student to get through, 5.8 if they've got more than 3 or more changes of major. And you can just keep adding on to that number. So watching when a student makes a change of major could mean that they're undecided, that they really don't know. So that's a flag for us that we want to have a conversation with a student to really try to get at why are they making that decision? Is it something that's happening in their coursework? More of that holistic advising kind of thing to figure out what's happening with that student.
Chancellor Lovell, do you think about it the same way? Change the major, add a year?
I'm not. I do believe. I'm not sure. I don't have the data to say it would add a year, but it certainly would add more time. Because again, when they change the major, the courses that they take, they're adding credits, to what they need to graduate for a particular course option or field study they're going into.
It comes back into the same issue. You can't offer all courses all the time, and so if a student gets behind in a curriculum map, then it could be sequencing. And again, some of it alleviation might be to come up with alternative ways of offering delivery, but right now with limited resources, it's just simply unrealistic to offer everything every semester.
Regent Vasquez.
One of the things when we talk about this topic and students of color and underrepresented, I get a little frustrated because the frustration is that the UW system and campuses have been doing things for decades. It's not new. I think I would have a very different sense of feelings if we were saying, we just started within the last 5 years, 10 years. We've had centers for minority students for decades. For me, there's two very important critical points. One is the incoming students of color. And I'm not sure there are times that we talk a lot about them. And I think we should talk about them because they're the ones that then we're going to have to work with. The second one is the graduation rate. And I think that we do have a greater degree of ability to influence that number, the graduation rates. So my question is, when are we going to have some serious discussion about the kind of student that needs to come into the UW system so that the graduation number increases? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many people we bring if they're not graduating. I think we're just creating problems for them if we focus a lot on bringing people in, and in some cases we may bring them in knowing they're not, or they're marginally going to be successful. So that's a concern that I have. And second of all, while I hear a lot of discussion, and we got this very thick and nice pamphlet, system-wide, what is it that we have learned? What are the lessons learned that we are applying? I thought that's where Regent Bradley was going in terms of this crown jewel and one crown. What are the system-wide lessons that have been learned that we could go from campus to campus, recognizing the differences and all the nuances, but here are some true and tested methods, techniques that seem to work. And then the final thing that I want to also mention, and this one's going to be a little strange, is while we have all of these support systems, what are we doing to help students of color become self-sufficient? That, I don't want to have students of color, the only way they're going to be successful is they go somewhere to get help. What are we doing to help them develop some internal sustainable skills, or skills that they can go out and seek out the resources that they need, that they don't have to wait for somebody to point out, number one, you got a problem, and number two, let me tell you what the problem is. How do we help them? And I think they all recognize that they're a problem. For me, what's more important is how do we get them to get to the point where they don't have to wait till somebody says, oh, by the way, let me give you by the hand and tell you where to go, that they've got to figure it out themselves. There's a lot of stuff I threw at you.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best to answer at least part of it, let Mark maybe answer some more. I think your point is very well taken. I think we saw that we had a 40%, graduation rate in 6 years. For our students of color, that is at 22%, so it's almost half of what our the whole university is. Thing that I'm most excited about, which I mentioned in my talk, is that the first year retention for the things that we're doing now, there's virtually no difference between the students of color and the general population in terms of the first year retention, which is a great step. We're going to have to take a couple of years, as Mark knows. It takes these cohorts take 6 years to graduate. We look at them, so we'll see how much we continue to retain those students within 6 years. But I think, and the reason why that number is traditionally so much lower is because it's a college readiness problem. Students of color, typically that come to our campus, are not college ready. They need to have remedial work. And I've talked before, if a student needs remedial math, remedial English, their graduation rates plummet. And so the best thing we can do, so they don't even need those services you asked. If they're college ready when they are on our campus, they're not going to need any of these special programs that we put in place for those students who need to have that option. So I think, as I mentioned, the last part of my activities I'm focusing on is helping students, get what they need in the K through 12, so they don't need to come to our campus and get those skills and that knowledge provided to them. And so I think, again, a thing that I would want everyone to take away is that if we can help get the pipeline problem solved, I think you're going to see, certainly on my campus, I think all the rest of the campuses, those rates go way up.
Chancellor Madison, you wanted to address that? Do you want to say something? No.
Your first question. How's that? Okay. Your first question a moment ago was about the four-year graduation rate. These are issues that are not common, that are common beyond Wisconsin. I mean, other schools, of course, across the country have these same sorts of issues. But what I found somewhat unique when I arrived in this state, after many years of experience at other schools and other places, was a expectation among parents and students that it's going to take at least 5 years to graduate. In conversations with parents, they just, in casual conversation, they talk about, they're going to be here 5 years, we're going to rent this apartment for the next 3 years, and we're going to, there was an expectation that it's going to be that. And on the campus, the same expectation. So we're trying to change the conversation with both the campus community and the parents and the students that this can be done in 4 years if you're careful, if you plan carefully, if you don't change your major 3 times, if you listen to your advisor, if you take the courses you're supposed to take when you're supposed to take them. But changing the culture is part of the solution. I had never heard the term super senior until I got to Wisconsin. We've even named it here. And so part of it is changing the conversation both on campus and with the students and with their parents.
Thank you for adding that. Bartel.
I have a question about the graduation rates, 4 year, 6 year, and the calculations. And I just observed that any number of times that we've had presentations, we've heard that where a transfer student is involved, the university to which the transfer student goes doesn't count that graduation. And I'm not clear. I understand that there are factors going both ways, but what are those factors? What is the rationale for just arbitrarily saying that you can't count that 4 year or 6 year or 5 year graduation where that student ends up?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's IPEDS data, and it's traceable to the NCAA.
What?
The fact that we talk about a 6 year graduation rate originated in the 70s with the NCAA and the way to track student success amongst athletes. That we even talk about a 6 year graduation rate originated there. Right? The 4 years was the only thing we talked about before that within higher ed. Okay? But the NCAA said, these students are competing. It's not probably reasonable to ask them to finish in 4 when they got these other commitments. So let's look at if it took time and a half to graduate. And it became a standard that we use. So unfortunately, we've sort of even moved the national discourse amongst our students, as Bernie was pointing out, to thinking not about 4, but something a little bit longer, and earning that moniker of super senior. Not a good one. And so we have moved that way. Now, talking about the transfer students, again, this is IPADS. It says follow them at your institution. and follow new freshmen to the end. Within the system, we do that so that we can report it to IPEDS. And I think it's an important moniker to watch, an important entity to watch for our individual institutions to say, how are we doing it, moving those students who come to us through. But we know that at many of our institutions, they're coming knowing they're going to transfer. And we do track that. And so we watch within the system what our graduation rates are within the system. So a student comes to, say, Oshkosh and ends up graduating from Madison, we look at Oshkosh and say, how successful have your students been at graduating from your institution and also graduating from other UW system institutions. We've also started to look at, we now have a data set that we can go out and look at students who go to other institutions outside the UW system. And in the packet, this is what the data shows, right? So in here, the light blue one at the bottom is those that graduated within, actually all the blues, graduated within the UW system in either 4, 5, or 6 years. That little red bar up there is graduated from some non-UW institution. We're still following the students where they start and then saying how successful they are. And this is really important to the individual institutions. But many of our institutions are also tracking, and we track within the system, how effective a student is once they transfer. So they go from the UW colleges, or they go from a Minnesota school or an Illinois school, and they come into one of our institutions. What's their retention rate? What's their 4-year graduation rate? And that's what you can see over here in the transfer students, the second bar. We're tracking here their 4-year it's a 6-year graduation rate. So what percentage of those transfer students got done in 4 years, 5 years, or 6 years? This is the 4-year bar, and then the 5 and the 6. And then how many of them went to another institution and graduated from that? So they actually transferred at least twice, transferred within the system and then out of the system. And then how many are still enrolled? We are tracking that. It gets to be a very confusing sort of presentation to take all of those pieces and get them out there. But we pay very close attention to what our transfer students do. And many of our universities are looking not only at how they do, but looking at the individual institutions that they came from, and then helping those institutions understand how those students did when they got to their campus and their institution, and trying to build a bridge between those. Oshkosh in particular has built bridges with many of its 2-year partners, but all of our institutions are working with, especially their biggest transfer institutions, the ones that send them the most students, to make sure that bridge is as effective as possible.
Regent Milner?
Some of us had an opportunity to go to a conference in December where they talked about time to degree and retention, not only in our state but throughout the country in various states. And one of the strategies that they're using in some of the other states is to focus on a 15 credit per semester. And clearly a focus on 15 credits per semester gets you much closer to a 4-year graduation rate. But in addition to that, some of the data that they've collected shows higher GPAs and also higher retention because, there's a closer focus to the campus. And we've seen none of that data none of that data points in anything we've seen. And I'm just wondering, is that something that you are considering either a focus on or a measurement of?
Well, I would just say that one of the things we keep track of is how many students at the end of their freshman year have 24 credits or more. And if students get 24 credits their freshman year, their graduation rates go, retention rates go way up. And so that's an indicator. So if we could get
to... But that's 12 credits per semester.
I know. Yeah. So if we could get to 15, I believe that we would say even a higher degree. Again, one of the challenges we face is many of our students, 44% need remedial math, 32% remedial English. They have to take classes not for credit their freshman year to get up to college ready. And so I think for us it's a challenge to ask them to do 15 when they're going to have trouble doing 12 because of the other courses they're taking not for credit.
And if they're Pell eligible, that means there's probably financial issues. And so how do you, realistically, can they juggle? What kind of schedule can they juggle given how they're having to pay for school?
Your point's well taken. If we could get the students so they did have 15 credits per semester, I think you'd see them be much more successful.
I hadn't realized the remedials actually are credit course. They're not for credit, but it's essentially a credit course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you look at many of our remedial students, if you gave them credit for it, awarded credit, counted it as a 2 or a 3 credit class, and some of these take as much time as a 3 credit class, many of them, almost all of them, really would be at 15 credits because they've got to be at 12 to qualify for their financial aid.
Regent Pruitt, and then, Chancellor Wells.
This around the 4-year degree thing, I think we're getting at a place that makes more sense, at least to us that live on campuses that have such a diverse student body, first-generation college graduates, lower income, students of color, older students, younger students. To expect them to somehow fit closer to a 4-year graduation model is just not realistic. It's not realistic. It never has been. And I understand the super senior thing here, and I agree with Bernie. That's kind of the first time I heard that. But let's not overstate that. I've been in a lot of other states too. And it's the same kind of problems and challenges that they're having, we're having, in moving our students more successfully, cutting down the time to degree. But if we're going to say the standard we want to go to is that we got to get 80% of the people or 60% of the people to agree within 4 years, we're fooling ourselves. That's a model of an institution that is highly selective in admissions, that has a very high average family income. If you come out of that kind of an institution as a super senior, well, maybe you're wasting taxpayer resources. But when you come to UW-Oshkosh, that's not who our students are. And increasingly, they're more challenged, lots of levels. Mom dies, they got to go back home and work. And they're working not just to pay for their education, they're working to make contributions to their family as well. So these are what most of our students are like these days. And when we start looking at the national data set, the socioeconomic inequality in this country is now exceeding what it was in the 20s. So what's happening is the populations we're trying to serve are becoming more diverse and more economically challenged, and it's just going to take more time for them to get to the American dream, so to speak.
Regent Pruitt and then Regent Falbo. Go ahead.
Mark, you began this with the big picture goal, which is the goal of increasing by 80,000 the number of college graduates in Wisconsin. And clearly, the laser focus on retention and graduation. And I just want to compliment both the presenters, and I'm sure reflective of what's going on across the campuses in terms of these efforts. I was just curious a little bit about the other way you attack that goal is obviously to change the pool or enlarge the enrollment pool, both in terms of numbers and potentially shifting and changing composition. And I'm wondering if you or others would have just any comments about key strategies going forward. I mean, it strikes me that, Rick just talked about the ever-evolving challenges in terms of low and moderate income students and families, and how do we deal with that. There's the issue of sort of non-traditional students, and certainly the flex degree and other options in online education. There are UW-Platteville, tri-state initiatives. How do we selectively recruit potentially out-of-state students to come in and have with different retention graduates? There's also obviously Dreamers and the impact that potentially the changes in federal policy may have in that. But I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about pools and what that means.
A couple things. I think the comments that both Mike and Renee made are really important for us to keep in mind, is that each of our institutions has a different mission. Not just in the degree programs they offer, but in the student bodies that they serve. We have some access institutions whose mission are to be open and to take students that are academically a little less prepared than others. Other of our institutions really are pushing towards elite. UW-Madison in particular, the student body that they recruit, that they enroll, has a much higher high school GPA, high school class rank, and ACT score than the rest of our institutions. And as you look through the comprehensive institutions, you see a gradient in that background of academic preparation. We also see a gradation in the economic background of those students from institution to institution, and in the racial and ethnic makeup of those institutions. All of our institutions are are moving towards being more economically diverse and more racially diverse, and still hitting their mission. So these are what we're going to see is that as we move through different economic times, our institutions are going to show different results in their retention rates and their graduation rates based on the student body they have. The Milwaukees, the Superiors, the Parksides are going to have a very different student body and very different results as we get impacted by economic changes, we get impacted by tuition increases or decreases, and the other institutions will be able to handle those because of sort of the financial background of their student bodies. We haven't, all of our institutions have thought about their recruitment practices and turning those up. Superior and Milwaukee, as they pointed out, and to an extent Parkside, have decided to remain access institutions and not to go to that point of becoming an elite institution, going after only the best and most talented academic students. And we need to be able to, if we're going to hit 80,000, we've got to be able to educate a larger swath of this population than we have been, both economically and racially and ethnically. And so it's important for institutions like Milwaukee and Superior and Parkside, all of our institutions, to be open to that. And some of our institutions to keep their eye on maintaining that sort of focus also on elite students from diverse backgrounds. Dick?
I'd just like to add something to this discussion of the four-year degree. We have statistics in this system dating back to 1981. The four-year graduation rate for the entire system in 1981 was 17%. So if we're 29 now, that is not a reflection that in the good old days we did much better than this. I think part of the reality that we have to have in this is with an increasingly diverse population, we have dramatically increased the four-year graduation rate of our students. It may not be where we want it, but I think we have to understand that this is a process that we are engaged in, and we have across our system made dramatic improvements. So I think it's important to understand that context.
Yeah, this chart really points to some of that too. You know, we hear that most of our students graduate in 5 or 6 years, and it's simply not true. And if you look at the new entering freshmen here, more of our students, of those that graduate from UW institution, 49% of them do so in 4 years. 49% do it in 4 years. You know, the fifth year, yeah, we get a significant number. 29% of the total population graduates in 4 years, and 28% in between 4 and 5. So most of our students that graduate do get out in 4 years, not 5 or 6 or 7.
All right, Regent Falbo, and then Regent Poyer, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Am I the only one in the room that was a super freshman? I have no problem with the senior. Freshman year was a killer.
I think, Regent Falbo, you were a super student at all levels.
You obviously haven't looked at the transcripts. I have a couple of things, and I think part of it is how we define success, and I think Chancellor Telfer put it in a really good perspective. We're serving much different populations today, and based on what you guys are telling us, we're working hard at making that a success in many different ways on many different fronts, and it's a very difficult task because it has so many fronts. I want to look at some of these things and say, this is good stuff. And as long as we keep whatever it is, whether it's a 4-year graduation rate, whether it's a 5-year, whether it's a 6-year, whether it's our soon-to-be renamed growth agenda, where we have tools today that we didn't have when we started that growth agenda, such as the flexible degree option, where there's 750,000 people in this state that we're going to go after that have some college credits. We're all working towards the same end, but the definition, there's many definitions of what that end is today that maybe there weren't a long time ago. So I think this is stuff.
Agreed. Regent Poyer.
We've heard a lot about different strategies that you guys have been using to increase this number. I mean, it's good to know that we have moved it up a bit, see more students graduating in 4 years. But I was wondering if you campuses or any of the others have entertained the idea of doing the 4 or 5 year contract again with students, so that you guarantee that in 4 or 5 years students will graduate, will get you into the classes we need if you maintain a certain GPA. I think it could be, I'm not sure if it is a viable strategy, but I think it could be, especially to target minorities on campus and things like that, because you can provide more advising, more contact with them throughout the process of their education at your campuses.
Throughout the system, most of our institutions have the 4-year contract on the books, and there's a relatively small number of students that have stepped into that. It's also something that hasn't been pushed greatly. When it first came out, there was a pretty big push to get students into it, and a lot of students didn't stay into it. I think with that, any chancellors that want to comment about where they're at, or Joe?
We have that, and as you say, it's not a high demand item. I mean, the other thing that, and you've heard me say this before, some of our best students, I talk to them, and they'll say, I'm going to take 5 years, want to do 2 majors, I want to do an internship, I want to study abroad. I think the biggest, and I don't know if we have the data on this, but anecdotally, difference generationally is when students today say they're working, they're really working. A lot of hours, sometimes 30 and 40 hours a week at a job. And I just sort of recoil and, wow, because the research shows clearly once you get above 20 hours, it's detrimental. And the other thing that's very important is where they're working. If we can get them jobs on campus, the data show that's a lot better for their progress as well. But that, to me, I mean, I don't know about your experiences, but I had jobs and they were on campus and they were maybe 10 hours a week, and now somebody will be out at a local retailer for 30 to 40 hours. That has a very big impact. Now, why is that happening? I mean, obviously, we know the out-of-pocket cost for students today is higher than it's been in the past, and also I think the lifestyle is a bit different as well. And I mean, we didn't have a phone plan, just as one small. I love to tell students that about, the res hall, there was one phone on the, wired to the wall, and hey gal, are you down there? Your mom's on the phone. Do you want to? And very different today.
And
so,
you needed a quarter to use it.
That's right. Yeah.
Thanks.
There's a really important point here. Back in the late 70s, or around the time, just after this institution formed and consolidated to form the system, the average student to pay all of their costs, working at minimum wage, needed to work 600 hours a year to recoup their costs, to be able to pay. It's now over 1,500 hours a year. That's 3/4 time, right? That's 75% full time. So why are our students working more? I think we can understand it pretty easily. The costs are higher. The ability of our students to earn money is different as well. So our students are working more. They're more likely. But yet, we have increased our 4-year graduation rate from 17% at that time to upwards of 29%. And we're working with a student body that is economically less advantaged than they were at that time. That's a really positive message.
President Riley, some closing comments.
Yes, thank you, President Smith. And Chancellor Gao mentioned the phone down the hall in the dorm, and I want people to know that Joe's mother did tell me he never called, he never wrote, and he doesn't feel guilty about it. That's what really sad. So I wanted to thank Mark and Mike and Renee and the Regents who participated, and the Chancellor. This has been a terrific presentation, I think a terrific discussion, and aimed right at the heart of what we do and what we need to do better at. And I thought I'd take a minute, especially for the newer Regents, just to talk about a little big picture background on what you heard today and how we got here. 4 to 5 years ago, the chancellors, provosts, and system administration people got together and looked at the number of people with a college degree or the baccalaureate degree we had in Wisconsin, looked at what was happening nationally in terms of the United States competitiveness in that regard with international numbers, And we, as we looked hard at those data 4 to 5 years ago, thought, well, we've got a looming crisis here. We are falling behind as a country in the proportion of our population with a college degree. In Wisconsin, we are 2 percentage points below the national average among the states of people with a baccalaureate degree. And why is that significant? Well, when at an economic level for the state, when you look at these data nationwide, it tracks pretty much 1-to-1 across the 50 states. The states that have a higher percentage of college graduates in their populations have higher per capita incomes. Why is it important for individuals? I think it's pretty apparent that for young people now to have a decent life in the 21st century, they're going to have education beyond the secondary level. They're going to have some kind of post-secondary credentials. So both for our nation and our state and its economic competitiveness, for the quality of individual Wisconsin citizens' lives, this is really important stuff. So we sat down and said, what are we going to do about this? And we decided we would work through together. Each chancellor brought in his or her leadership team, met with me and my leadership team, and set out what their institution's contribution would be to that 80,000 additional baccalaureate degree holders we would shoot to have in 2025 on top of what our trajectory then would have yielded if we just kept that same trajectory. This was a scary thing to do, and it's still scary. This is a big leap in what some might call productivity, but I think we did it for the right reasons. So each institution has an elaborate plan on numbers that they are shooting for. They have check-in points along the way between now and 2025 about whether they're on trajectory. And some of the data that Mark showed you is a compilation of those individual campus plans to see, well, we're doing well on this indicator, but not as well on the other. How do we redouble back on the ones we're not doing as well on and fix those? Some of those intermediate dialogues with the institutions, since we started to now, have resulted in some changes in their plans. We adjust things as we go along. So I just want people to understand that the effort that Mark's talking in part about here has deep roots and goes back to some really serious conversations that all of us in the system had about what we needed to do as the public university for the state and the country. And why in particular is closing the achievement gap important? A lot of what Mark focused on in his presentation and Mike and Renee did. Simple demographics is the answer. We can't meet our goals. We cannot be successful unless more students of color get to a degree, unless more students from poorer families get to a degree, unless more recent immigrant students get to a degree. We cannot make those numbers in this state and in that country. It's undeniable. So unless we can be more successful using all of the means that we're talking about, we will continue to fall farther behind. And other nations are building out their post-secondary systems at a very, very rapid rate. We know that. And we are now, as a country, the last time I looked, below the 10th most educated country in the world. We were first until about 10 years ago. So this is just all very important. I wanted people to know that this system early on took on that significant challenge. You'll have a booklet in your folders tomorrow morning from ACE and some of the other national associations that they just put out on degree completion. And Molly Broad will talk a bit about that in her presentation to this board tomorrow. That big group is putting out now what we started 4 to 5 years ago in the UW system. So significant challenges, high bar, but I want the takeaway message from this session to be we are really working like the devil to get there because we know how important it is for this state, for this country, that we get there.
Well said, Kevin. And thank you to everybody. More on this in March. We'll take about no more than 10 minutes now and finish up the morning. All right, and now for an update on Knowledge Powers Wisconsin, I'll turn things over to President Riley.
Thank you, President Smith. You may recall that we announced last November that the system has developed a new communication strategy, or a brand, if you will, called Knowledge Powers Wisconsin. And you'll recall, too, perhaps, that this brand platform was developed with a lot of input from across the UW system and across the state. Public opinion surveys showed how we needed to explain our value in a new way that reflects both how we think about ourselves, but also how others see us. Those surveys indicated that people feel proud of the UW system institutions and the educational opportunities we offer, but they think we can do a better job of stimulating job growth and supporting local industries. Wisconsin citizens from all walks of life in the state want our colleges and universities and extension networks to play an active role in the state's long-term economic vitality. Coming out of the worst recession since the Great Depression, those same citizens, not surprisingly, I think, are yearning to feel stronger and safer and more confident, and UW institutions can help renew that feeling of strength. That's part of the power in Knowledge Powers Wisconsin. So following up on our November discussion, Dave Giroux, who's our Executive Director of Communications and External Relations, will provide an update today on how this campaign is already being embraced by our institutions. With that, Dave.
Thank you, President Riley. President Smith. As President Riley said, my emphasis today will be on how this message platform is being leveraged, how it's already being used, and I'll stress that we are at the early stages. So our campuses are just finding ways to employ these new tools. And I'll give you a preview of a couple interesting things that are coming in the next week and in the next month or two. Last month, not last month, but in November, when we last talked about this, I introduced you to uwpowerswi.com, our new story hub, our microsite, where we dedicate a full web presence to success stories from around the state that showcase how we're creating a stronger workforce, stronger businesses, and stronger communities. The site is now populated with more than 50 of those success stories, and just recently we've added the new cover page story that you're looking at right there. It's a story about the new Fab Lab at UW-Stout. We have stories about the Wisconsin Innovation Service Center at UW-Whitewater, the Materials Science Center at UW-Eau Claire, and on every page, on every success story now, you'll find new social media integration. In other words, once you find a story you like, you are one click away from sharing it with everybody who's your friend, your connection on Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, and we're adding more. If it's social, we're going to try and build it into the site. And we're still building out more ways for people to share content once they get here that they like with everyone, including their state legislators, their business colleagues, whoever they think might be influenced by the compelling stories that our institutions are providing to us. And in fact, as I was sitting here checking my email, we got another great success story coming in from UW-Whitewater. So there's a great deal of enthusiasm in our institutions to provide this kind of content, to showcase what they're doing, how they're doing it, in this framework of stronger businesses, stronger workforce, stronger communities. Let me show you just a couple examples of how this is playing out elsewhere beyond our own website. At UW River Falls, in the local Chamber of Commerce newsletters, you'll see a special insert, Knowledge Powers Wisconsin Farmers, that may look vaguely familiar, may look like one of the ads that I showed you, but remember what I showed you was a modular concept that can and should be localized. And I want to salute Chancellor Van Gallen and his crew for doing just that. That is a photo of one of their own UW River Falls faculty members and an honest-to-goodness UW River Falls Holstein. Take note of the ear tag, Regent Bartel. But this is exactly what we intended it to be, how it was intended to be used. Localized, customized, tweaked in whatever way we can to help drive home that message that UW River Falls is having a strong, very positive impact on the agriculture industry in its region. You'll see another version of this same ad in the UW-Madison College of Ag alumni magazine coming out in the next month or two. And likewise, we know that other campuses, other institutions are working to localize these tools, and I'll touch on how that's happening in just a minute. At UW-Madison, we have everybody in Madison is fond of recycling, so we're finding ways to recycle our really good content. So on the UW-Madison wisc.edu site, you'll see a story about Knowledge Powers Wisconsin and how a lighting pioneer Electronic theater controls is prospering in Middleton. You'll find the exact same story with some different graphics on the uwpowerswi.com website. So a lot of cross-pollination, if you will, where we're finding the local success stories. The campus is branding it as Knowledge Powers Wisconsin on its web presence, which gets a considerable amount of web traffic on a daily basis, and driving people to the same content on our website where people can find it through other means as well. UW-Oshkosh has branded its community engagement web pages under Knowledge Powers Community. So again, campuses are finding ways to use the wording, the emblems, the name, the whole brand platform in varying ways to varying degrees. And that leads me to UW-Parkside, and Chancellor Ford has already shared with you copies of their Community Impact Report, and I'll let her tell you more about that.
Well, thank you, David, and it's nice to be able to share some of the things we're doing at UW-Parkside, also and show some of the other ways that we're using the Knowledge Powers theme and message on our campus and across the state. First of all, to go back to this morning's presentation, we, as a central focus, are focused on student success as well. But in addition to student success, we want to make sure that the message about our impact in our community, and particularly in our region of southeastern Wisconsin, is shared. So we use the Knowledge Powers theme to create an impact report, which I've provided, and I have extra copies available as well. And this was produced in the fall semester, even as we begun conversations around Knowledge Powers, and we thought it was a perfect title for our impact across southeastern Wisconsin. So you have copies of that. The other thing that we did is, as we produced radio spots and advertising to get the message out about degree opportunities at UW-Parkside, we created radio ads using this theme. And so David's going to share one of those. We actually had two, one for the pre-health program, but we're going to feature today the MBA program at UW-Parkside. So thanks.
Sure, an MBA would help me get ahead, but how do I find the time?
The MBA at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside may be the answer. You choose the mix of online or on-campus classes to fit your schedule. The University of Wisconsin and AACSB International are your assurance of quality. For more information, visit uwp.edu, keyword MBA, or call 262-595-2046. At the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, knowledge powers your career.
So knowledge powers your career. Regent Rybar, it almost makes you want to go back and enroll at UW-Parkside, doesn't it? So again, these are tools that we've provided, and I'll just show you a snapshot of some of the graphic tools that we've actually provided through a shared web folder to all of our communications directors at all of our UW institutions. There are Facebook icons, Facebook banners, electronic ads, all of which are open source. In other words, they're not locked down, they're not being controlled by my office. They can be taken out, customized, the photos can be changed, the text can be altered, the colors can be changed to match the institutional logos. So when this is placed by UW Stevens Point, the red will become purple. When it's placed by UW Superior, then you'll see a lot of black and yellow incorporated into the ads. So again, the emphasis is not on a top-down approach, but on a bottom-up approach, giving people the tools to embrace and leverage this message wherever they see fit. We're doing the same on some of the legislative fact sheets that we'll be distributing around the Capitol in the coming weeks and months. We're branding them with the Knowledge Powers Wisconsin, including one that's being developed, what you see as a draft concept on the cover there, of the University of Wisconsin Flexible Option degree, a very popular topic, one where we're getting a lot of inquiries. We're developing a fact sheet, and that's part of Knowledge Powers Wisconsin. And just in time for Valentine's Day, we've given you a small supply of some Knowledge Powers Wisconsin's workforce postcards. Now, I thought about having decorated shoeboxes at each of your desks so that you could trade Valentines in advance of next week, but we just didn't have time to pull that together. I thought you'd enjoy that, Regent Falbo. But these are, in fact, just a small run. We wanted to show you an example of how we as UW System or any of our institutions could take these graphics and produce something actually practical. Now, a postcard may or may not be a popular item, but it just shows you that you can take that text. And the one mistake I think we made was not leaving a place to sign the thing with a customized note, but You'll see the note about how many graduates that we're producing every year. And I want the text matters. The words are important here. That we will produce 33,000 new grads this year, ready to put their talent and entrepreneurial spirit to work. They are prepared for careers in finance, engineering, science, nursing, and other fields. Now, those words we chose match up with the skills clusters that you heard about from Manpower when we talked about the Competitive Wisconsin Be Bold report. UW grads communicate clearly, solve problems creatively, and work well in teams. Those are part of our shared learning outcomes. Those are the qualities and abilities we seek to provide to every one of our graduates, regardless of what degree program they are in. So again, this is just another example of how we and our institutions can use these tools to communicate in various ways. I encourage you to take the postcard home, share it with a business colleague, maybe somebody in the state capitol who might find it interesting, tack it up on your bulletin board. I'll give it to my kids and they'll make collages out of these, something like that. But if you think you can use something else of this ilk with the Knowledge Powers Wisconsin framework on it, let us know, and we'll try and get that into the hopper. Social media is where we're really having a little bit of fun, and this is one of the new things that we're going to roll out next week. We already have a UW Powers WI Twitter account. We're populating it with links to all of those success stories that you're finding. As more and more of our institutions retweet and recycle the posts that we're putting out about their success stories, we'll build up some followers on this account. Next week, we're doing something really fun and out of the box. We're launching on Monday another Twitter account called UW Powers Me. And this is less institutional, less corporate, if you will, and more social. We're going to recruit students, faculty, alumni, staff from all of our institutions, and one at a time give them the keys to this Twitter account and let them tell in their own words, their own authentic voice, how knowledge is powering them. So from the student perspective, the knowledge that they are acquiring now in real time, they can tweet about the classes that they've taken today, the interactions they're having with professors and staff, interactions with fellow students, clubs, sports, all the things that enrich their UW educational experience. Alumni can talk about the business that they're engaged in today, the career fields that they are pursuing, and how their UW experience propelled them to success in life and work, and do so in a way that we can't. If we try and put those words in their mouth, we end up sounding very corporate, and I'll be the first to admit that. When they give voice to those thoughts and those ideas and those ambitions themselves, then they sound more fun, more real. And the whole experience becomes what social media was meant to do, and that is be honestly social. In terms of our own faculty and staff, I think about some of the scientists that I know who work on really meaningful work here at UW-Madison, and I know them personally, and I want to give them a platform to talk about how the university provides a place for them to pursue big ideas, big discoveries, things that will make a huge difference in our health, our society, our economy, and our environment. And so this will launch on Monday with a young lady by the name of Jamie, and I'm going to get her name wrong, but I think it's Procarioni at UW-Platteville. She'll be our first UW Powers Me tweeter out of the gate. We've got tweeters lined up from UW-Green Bay, UW-Madison, UW-Parkside, and we have more coming, and they are students, and they are alumni. And when I talked to our faculty and academic staff reps about this last week, I heard a lot of enthusiasm. Who knows? Just saying, we might even have a provost or a chancellor who might be interested in taking a week at the handle of our UW Powers Me Twitter account and talking about how their experience as a UW leader empowers them and what they see happening at their institutions. So some really fun things, unconventional, out of the box. This curated account will be an interesting experiment for us. It costs us nothing except a little bit of coordination and time, and I think it has real potential to be very, very interesting conversation in social media space. Coming up in the future, you'll also see the Knowledge Powers Wisconsin theme applied to a number of other venues, one of which is our undergraduate, our posters in the Rotunda Day on April 17th in the Capitol, where we have well more than 100, maybe hundreds of UW students from around the state come and exhibit their research in the Capitol and engage with state legislators. The power of undergraduate research. We're really going to emphasize that and encourage students to showcase in their poster displays how their research contributes to a stronger workforce, stronger businesses, and stronger local communities where they live and go to school. Not listed on a slide here, but I'll give you a couple other things to look forward to. We have the Wisconsin Governors Conference on Tourism, and the theme for that tourism conference that we did not pick, this is the Governors Conference, is the power of fun. The power of fun, and we are going to be presenting at that conference and talking about the ways, and this will be kind of interesting and fun too, that knowledge powers Wisconsin tourism. Knowledge powers Wisconsin fun. And we have to recognize that we in our institutions, our athletic teams, our students, our visitors, play a big role in Wisconsin's tourism industry. And so we're going to have a more prominent role at the Wisconsin Conference, the Governor's Conference on Tourism. Likewise, next fall, when you see high school counselors and parents getting in the mail their copy of the Introduction to the UW System, our view book that is sent out to guidance counselors and high school students all around the state, it will be about how knowledge powers your future, or something along those lines. So we're really finding interesting, fun, creative ways to leverage this message, now that we understand what it is and how to use it, in very different ways across many different platforms. And one of the more fun things that we're partnering with is a Wisconsin Biz publication that will be coming out in the next couple of months, produced by Biz Times in Milwaukee. This is a major part of WEDC's In Wisconsin campaign. This is a new statewide economic development publication, one that will be shared with regional economic development entities, distributed by the WEDC itself, and distributed directly to all the people who subscribe to Biz Times in Milwaukee. It will be distributed both in the state of Wisconsin and in surrounding states. And as a major sponsor of this publication, we will have 8 pages of dedicated content about the UW system and how we are powering Wisconsin's economy. We will be showcased, in essence, as one of the great economic development assets of Wisconsin. And I think this is a perfect venue, a perfect platform for us to talk about knowledge powers Wisconsin. So those are a few of the fun things that we're working on. Those are a few of the ways that Chancellor Ford and Chancellor Van Gallen and Chancellor Ward and others are leveraging this at their institutional level, and there's more to come. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Questions or comments for Mr. Knowledge Powers Giroux? Yes, Regent Vasquez.
Do these type of campaigns have kind of a lifespan of a certain time? Or?
They do, and a lot of it has to do, the question was, does the campaign have a lifespan? When we went into this, actually, we were thinking a very short time span. We were thinking about a near-term communication strategy. What we've been encouraged to think about by a lot of people who know more about this than I do is thinking of this as a long-term brand. So underneath the words Knowledge Powers Wisconsin is a brand platform where we want to talk about how the University of Wisconsin system multiplies the power of our learners, our doers. And that's a lot of marketing speak, but underneath that are ways that we want to think and act. And we reflect that now in Knowledge Powers Wisconsin. These kind of campaigns, as they endure, inevitably evolve. We find better ways to articulate the message. I'm really looking forward to putting a lot of different words after the word Wisconsin. Knowledge Powers Wisconsin art and culture. Knowledge Powers Wisconsin entrepreneurship. Knowledge Powers Wisconsin. And with every new word we put after that, we find a new way to articulate our message and our value. So I think that flexibility, that modular nature, actually gives the campaign more legs because we're not locked in to a rigid, inflexible framework.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because to me it seemed like it was much more than just kind of a very active commercial, but almost a branding idea.
That's the way we're trying to think about it now, Regent Vasquez.
Regent Bartel.
David, it would appear that this campaign has a lot of objectives. It's very broad in its focus. How would you identify, how would you prioritize those objectives? Political, educational? What would you say are the 3 most important objectives of this campaign?
Selfishly speaking, I think one of our biggest objectives is to convince people that we as an institution are worth investing in. And we've talked a lot about that. I think as a state, we want to see the state of Wisconsin reinvest in higher education. We want the state to view the university as an asset, as an investment, not an expenditure. And I think the way to do that is to articulate the return on investment. Start there. What is the return we're delivering up front? And then back into the message of why then we deserve your support as taxpayers, as partners. I think that's our number one objective. Let's be honest about that.
Are there other objectives?
But yes, I think in general, just to, if we think back to the survey that I showed you a little bit of last time, we've got to overcome some barriers. We've got to overcome some myths. People think that that a higher education is disconnected from today's economic reality or our economic future as a state. We've got to make that connection more salient and more clear for everyone. And that goes for people who are considering how to pursue their educational pathway, the parents of those young people, the non-traditional adults. I think it's a wrapper for all of the things that we're doing, such as the flexible option. That's new, that's innovative. We'll talk more about that tomorrow, I think, about the level of attention that that's gotten. But I think the more we can talk about that as powering the state's workforce and its economic vitality going forward, it's not that the idea itself would not have merit without a good theme around it, but I think it adds just a little bit of zip in a way that can be not only fun but effective.
The one thing that comes to mind as I look at this, well, two things. One is the only option you didn't give with that postcard is mailing it.
You can do that.
You can do that? Okay,
sure.
I just want to know. But the other
Get your forever stamps before they're gone.
This looks so flexible and so good, but I see system. What are we really trying to get across to the audience you want to reach? Is it our universities and our colleges?
Yes.
Or is it, because I think most people, we may not realize this as much because of the work we do and how we do it. We are an organization of colleges and universities and extensions.
Yes.
System doesn't mean a lot
exactly.
to a lot of people, or probably to most people in the audience you're going after.
That's why I think back to the UW River Falls ad and the Madison version of that same ad that you saw in the toolkit. That's where the real power lies, is where we can localize not only the image and the icon and the text, but also that brand identity, because we're the closest thing in higher education to a holding company. I know that's sacrilege to talk about ourselves that way. But in marketing terms, that's really kind of what we represent. The real brand power of the university is at the institutional local level. The power of UW-Whitewater, the power of UW-Stevens Point, those are, you think Whitewater and Stevens Point, you think purple. You think Pointers and Warhawks. If you have any affiliation with those institutions, that affiliation is powerful, it's deep-rooted, and it's enduring. That's exactly where the traction has to be. So the postcard that I showed you today was just that. It was just an example. We printed off a couple hundred of those for you to see how we can turn this into something tangible. I should have put one of the institution's logos on there and charged them for it.
Tyler?
So as I look at this and I see the UW brand coming out in this, and knowledge powers farmers and so on, and it
is an American-made tractor, thanks to you, Regent Tyler.
Thank you. Thanks. Good recognition. When I think of the transition to Wisconsin, in economic development and Wisconsin powers OEM fabricators, how do we retain the connection back to, as I imagine this rolling out, and it works its way into economic development, it works its way into the business and industry. How do you retain its roots?
Retain its what? I'm sorry?
How do you retain the campaign's roots back to, so when this becomes Wisconsin Powers OEM Fabricators and it becomes an economic development business building theme as an outgrowth of what you're doing, how do you maintain the roots back to the university?
That's a good question. I think graphically, we need to always put one of the institutional logos there, or the UW system logo, depending on the venue and the message. But I think as we tell these success stories, we've got to be more direct. Often we're very nuanced, a little too subtle in our communication about what we're doing and why it matters to people. Winston Churchill said, "Don't be subtle, don't be direct. If you have a point to make, hit it with a pile driver, then come back, hit it again, and then come back and hit it again a third time." I'm paraphrasing, but and I can't do a good Winston Churchill accent, otherwise I would. But the point is, we need to be more direct, more powerful in the way we communicate. We need to say to people, we are having an impact on the quality of life in Wisconsin, on the business success of electronic theater controls. That business grew out of university entrepreneurship and innovation. Its success and the impact it's having on the city of Madison and surrounding areas is in part due to the vitality of this institution. If you go to the In Wisconsin campaign run by WEDC, one of the showpieces there is Virent Energies, a company that grew out of UW-Madison research directly, and in fact one of its founders is still one of our faculty members at the College of Engineering. And in fact, when Governor Walker had a Talk with Walker meeting at their company, much of the conversation went to how do we hang on to the greatness that is the university. So I see a lot of opportunities for us to do that, but you're exactly right. We need to hang on to that and not lose that connective tissue.
So that's a great explanation, and I think if you can hone that to 3 words, you'll have.
I can't do it. Force me to tweet about it, and you'll get it down to 140 characters. So I'll tweet you later.
Anything else from the Regents? All right, I want to thank Dave and his colleagues very much for all the great work you can see he and others have done, and emphasize that it's been the work of his office with colleagues at all the institutions that has generated the enthusiasm that you can feel for this campaign, and we'll keep rolling it out with different adjustments for different institutions and different moments and different partners. This Wisconsin Biz will be one of the next new ones, and I think it will serve us well for quite a ways into the future. And speaking of the Churchill pile driver, just let me conclude this part of our meeting with a reminder. You know, the UW knowledge that powers Wisconsin is discovered and developed and disseminated by our UW faculty and staff. And when we talk about workforce development in Wisconsin, those of us who are trustees of the university, those of us who are leaders of the university need to think about our own workforce in that regard. And I just wanted to again remind us again that I know we are very committed to advocating in this budget cycle, after 4 years of compensation cuts, for more competitive compensation that will keep our faculty and staff producing that knowledge that powers Wisconsin for years to come. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, President Smith.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up this morning's activities with Chancellor Wells, who's going to provide us with a report, third in a series from our chancellors on UW-Oshkosh's strategic goals. Chancellor Wells.
Thank you. I first want to thank the Regents for giving our institutions an opportunity to give you an update on how we're doing in terms of our strategic goals. I think this is a wonderful new thing we're doing. Also later, we're going to be making a presentation in the Ready Committee on all the things we're doing with regard to workforce development initiatives and economic development initiatives as well. And Provost Ernst has joined me, so when I get in trouble with any question that you might have, he'll bail me out. That's the role of the Provost. So we'll see if I can get through this in enough time between now and lunch. I would have preferred that David be between you and lunch than me, but it didn't quite work out that way. What we do at UW-Oshkosh, I became the chancellor there in the fall of 2000, and we developed a very thorough strategic and operational planning process. And virtually every year, right about this time in January, we file our annual report against our strategic plan. So what you have being passed around is that actual annual report plus a copy of the PowerPoints that I'll be using to frame my remarks around it, and also some material on the University Studies program that we want to talk about as a macro strategy in dealing with achievement gaps and student success. So basically, this works. when we set up our strategic and operational planning process, we identified what we called horizontal distinctiveness, things that we wanted to characterize UW-Oshkosh in a way nationally across the whole institution. We talk about vertical distinctiveness in terms of things that will characterize a particular college or a particular program, but we felt that in terms of making sure that everyone could feel part of building excellence at UW-Oshkosh, we would pick something that cuts across the entire institution. And basically, we identified 3 kinds of things that we wanted to become nationally known and admired for. The first one was a national leader in sustainability. The second, the first part of my presentation is going to be more like a movie. The second part will be more like a slideshow. A catalyst in community collaboration. And the third, designing a distinctive, high-quality education. In terms of the way that we look at our institution and what our singular strategic focus is, this is the kind of centerfold in your annual report that I have up here on the screen. I want to just walk through it a little bit, but our strategic focus is enhancing essential student learning outcomes. And we, kind of going to the right of the chart, what we want to stay focused on is how do we provide more graduates with a better education so that they're talented, liberally educated, technically skilled global citizens who are actively engaged in their lives, in civic and political and social life and economic life. In order for that to happen, our faculty and our campus community generally said, well, our students are going to have to master more of the essential learning outcomes that characterize someone that receives a baccalaureate or master's degree from UW-Oshkosh. And our faculty has been involved for many years as an institution with the Liberal Education America's Promise movement, and these are the essential learning outcomes that are pretty much mirror that particular movement across the country that our faculty adopted about 4 years ago. And so the argument is the more that our students can master these essential learning outcomes, the more we'll accomplish the goal for having better educated citizens. Just to give you a little feel, behind each of these, there's something called a rubric that we've committed to. The rubric is a way of making sure that the students and the faculty and the staff are consistently giving feedback to the student on how they're doing with any particular essential learning outcome. So it's one thing to talk about we need graduates who are better creative thinkers. It's another thing to figure out how to make that clear, make sure the students understand what we mean by that, make sure whatever courses they're taking with us over the 4 or 5 or 6 years, that they're designed to help them achieve a greater mastery of these essential learning outcomes. And another thing I wanted to point out with this slide, we refer to these things, at least within the academic community, as higher order cognitive skills. And in the business community, they refer to them as soft skills. And any time I call them soft skills within my academic community, I get messages back from the fact that there's nothing soft about these higher order cognitive skills. And when I use the term higher order cognitive skills with the external stakeholder groups, they think that's kind of highfalutin. But the point is we're talking about the same thing. This is just an example of a rubric. Obviously, I'm not going to go over it in any great detail. But basically, we've broken down what do we mean by critical thinking in terms of the issues and the evidence and the influence of context, assumptions, so on, the components of what it means to be a good critical thinker. Then you go down on the top and you see there's a benchmark. And what the idea is for us to move our students through mastery of this particular critical thinking value rubric up to the capstone experience of a 4 level of mastery, right? So you can kind of understand that these are very well thought out. Another just quick example is the problem-solving value rubric as well. Right? So every one of those have these rubrics behind them. Now, for us to be able to maximize our students' mastery of the essential learning outcomes, they need to have more, which you've heard a lot about these HIPS, high-impact practices, more experiences as they're getting an education at UW-Oshkosh of these types. When you look down these types of high-impact practices, the research clearly shows that the more every one of our students can have more of these type of experiences with the institution, they will master at a greater level the essential learning outcome and be better prepared graduates. So then we go back and say, okay, if that's the case,
how do we make sure that our strategic and operational plans are organized in a way, particular operational plans, so that we intentionally use our resources to maximize, for example, more high-impact experiences for our students. So in our campus, we have what's essential to our strategic plan is our governing idea, mission, vision, values, strategic direction, and goals. But we have 8 operational plans that we update annually to try to make sure that we achieve the goals that we have in terms of better prepared graduates. And so the last part of the chart just reminds us that we have all types of resources in terms of all the talents and needs that students bring to us, the talents of our faculty, the investment in the state and donors and so on. And all those resources, we need to be very intentional and thoughtful in how we organize them through our strategic and operational planning practice to maximize this high-quality educational experience. So that's our frame. This is just, we call this an onion chart. Basically, this is a constant challenge to any university community to align the governing ideas with the strategic plans, with the operational plans. Also, you see we're trying to align what we do on the campus with UW Systems, Advantage Wisconsin framework. And so it's important, too, that we try to align what we're doing in the university-wide way with the strategic and operational plannings of our respective colleges. So let's go to the second major part of this presentation. What have our successes been? Basically, we've had 10 successful strategic outcomes since we committed to this a dozen years ago. We drove larger enrollments, increased rather significantly the numbers of students of color, secured more grants, added online accelerated collaborative degree programs, degree completion programs, raised the level of academic preparedness of our first-year students, added tenure faculty positions, enhanced our facilities. This is one I spent a little bit of time with. In this period of time from 2000 through the completion of some of our most recent projects, we will have invested $316 million in UW-Oshkosh. $160 million of that comes from the state of Wisconsin and taxpayers of Wisconsin, which we're hugely appreciative of. $111 million of that comes from program revenues, such as residence hall fees and business service fee revenues. The one here that's interesting for us is that more than $45 million of the $316 million comes from donor and university private sector partnership investment. And when we go to the Ready Committee, we'll show you some of the very unique and innovative private-public sector partnerships we've had that have led to significant enhancement of our facilities. So there's no taxpayer dollars in those funds, no student fee dollars. These are unique to donor, things related to our capital campaign, but some of these partnerships. And we've earned a national reputation, of course, for our commitment to green principles. We recognize the national model for developing exemplary campus-wide liberal education programs, emerging reputation for the way we engage and partner and collaborate with organizations and individuals, and we've been able to support our faculty and students in what I would consider some amazing achievements, particularly in these difficult times. If you follow the report, you see pages 2 through 7 will give you specific results of all those kind of successful strategic outcomes. Okay, now I want you to remember that's part of my presentation, because I'm very, very proud of our institution. UW-Oshkosh has been, an outstanding, very good university for a very, very long time, and it really started when Regent Whitburn came as a freshman. And that was he's not here, so I'm picking on him right now. And since then, you know how long a time that's been. This has been an outstanding institution. And I think during the last 12 years, we've become even better. So I would argue we've gone from a very good institution to an excellent institution, but we're not a great institution. And one of the reasons we're not a great institution yet is because there's still some big challenges that remain, and it's going to require additional big change. So let's go in those. Before I identify what the challenges are, when I'll identify the nature of the challenge that we face, the 3 big challenges that we face, then I'll, right after each one, talk about a macro strategy to address that challenge. I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about macro versus micro strategies. They're all important in terms of accomplishing what you want to do to improve your institution. And just think of the conversation that we had before on student success and closing achievement gaps. And there are all kinds of things we're doing. Many of them, if not most of them, are micro strategies. They're important. There's an initiative over here for this subset of students, or an initiative over here in this particular college or department. A lot of our micro strategies kind of roll around the perimeter of the institution a lot of times. And if we don't have more macro strategies, meaning things that go right to the heart of the institution, it's going to be hard for us to change or meet the challenges that we have. So in the cases of our challenges, improving student success, closing achievement gaps, that's the first one. Affordability of college, that's the second one. Competitive compensation and support for and development of our faculty and staff. So starting with improving student success, closing achievement gaps. Well, when we start out, it looks pretty good. When you look at back in 2000, we started our strategic planning process. We've increased the number of degrees awarded, and part of the growth agenda things we've been committing to, by 28%. And you look at the number of degree-seeking students that have increased since that time too. You know, so what we wanted to show you here is even our enrollment has gone up almost 17%. We were one of the 3 fastest-growing institutions in the UW system with Platteville and UW-Milwaukee. You see we grew by almost 17%, but the degrees awarded grew by 28%. And then our total enrollment grew by 15%. Now, when we start looking at the 6-year success progress rate for full-time first-year students, and we do it by cohort, this looks pretty good too, because as Mark set up before, by the way, this particular 6-year success progress rate, and the way it's done nationally, comes out of a thing called the Voluntary System of Accountability and the College Portrait Project that all UW system institutions are part of, and all this data, this kind of stuff, is in our accountability reports for each of the institutions. And I thought it would be helpful to show you some of the good news here with regard to this particular thing we pay attention to. So graduated from UW-Oshkosh within 6 years, it's a 47% graduation rate. Then you have another 16% who graduated from any other institution. I didn't stay Wisconsin bias. It's any other institution in the country. The National Clearinghouse data set allows you to figure that out. So those students that started in 2002 at UW-Oshkosh, 6 years later, 16% of them graduated from another institution other than UW-Oshkosh. Still enrolled in UW-Oshkosh, that cohort, 3.7%. Still enrolled at some other institution in the country, 10%. So the total graduated or still enrolled of that cohort was 77%. Now, we're a little sensitive about this in our universities because you heard a little bit about this kind of haphazard way, the 6-year graduation rate that's just focused on full-time, first-time students a row, right? And we get hammered sometimes. You're graduating less than half of the students you accept 6 years later? Well, no. What we're saying is 77% of them either graduated there somewhere else, or they're still banging away to graduate. And I think that's good. Now, when you go to the 2006 cohort, the most recent one, we look 6 years out of UW-Oshkosh, you see we've had a 5% rate of change, improvement in graduated from Oshkosh, almost 7% from another institution, still enrolled at Oshkosh, a 29% rate of increase in improvement, a decline in enrolled elsewhere, and then the overall rate has jumped from 77% to almost 81%. Okay, so I would like to quit right now and sit down and go to lunch, because what you're going to see next isn't pretty. And it's in the tradition of Jim Collins' Good to Great, some of our brutal facts, which we've seen a little bit this morning too. Okay, this is the first and second-year retention rate for our institution, and when you see these next set of slides, I purposely picked these 2 cohorts because one's pre-Great Recession and the other is hopefully coming out of the Great Recession. So you see an interesting situation at UW-Oshkosh. Up to fall 2005, what happened in terms of our gap between students of color and white students, right? It would open, then it would close dramatically sometimes. It opened, then closed, and finally, in the fall 2007 cohort, the fall 2008, 78.7% of our students of color came back to UW-Oshkosh. So the gap is in the other direction, 1.9%. Then, look at the fall 2011. This is what I mean with a brutal fact. That rate for everyone has declined. The rate of decline is 2%. The students of color rate of decline, dramatic rate of decline now. It's not, the percentage of change over the original percentage in 2007 is 17, almost 18%. White students hardly changed at all. And so the gap goes from plus 1.9, advantaged students of color, to minus 12.2. Now remember Mark's statistic earlier about the whole system, and the gap this year I think Mark was 8%. So part of what I want to make sure we understand, and this is what we're all committed to here, because we can learn a lot from each other this way, is that's all well and good, but until you start looking at particular institutions with particular kinds of missions and synchronous and challenges, there's lots of differences. There are, in my opinion, probably a subset of institutions that, at least for the time being, because I think most of my colleagues will tell you what I just told you, these things can shift very dramatically, these achievement gaps from one year to the next. We've got a set that have done a really good job right now. If we were doing this back in fall 2007, 2008, we'd be one of those institutions, but then we got another set of us over here where the gap is gotten larger. And unfortunately, UW-Oshkosh right now is within that particular group at this time. Okay, so let's start to look into this a little more, and let's start by the Pell, because the Pell, non-Pell. One of the reasons a lot of us are talking about Pell, non-Pell is we're all exceptionally concerned about what could happen to that federal financial aid program. If there's one single thing that's important to giving Americans opportunity in this country, we're now increasingly challenged in terms of becoming less and less affluent, it's that program. So basically in 2007 cohort, the award range, which you could get, was 400 to 4,300, or 550 to 5,550 in the 2000 cohort. So the upper limit of the range improved by 28%. The average award given for our 2007 student cohort was 2,600. The average for 2000 was 3,500, for a significant increase. The total awards on our campus were 2,270, went up 63% to 3,700. Now this is the total number of the free, I love to say it because I can't say it fast well enough, the free application for federal student aid form, that's how you apply for it, right? There were 8,940 of those forms processed by our Student Financial Aid Office. Then there are 11,500. So you see a lot of people who need aid don't get it still, okay? Now, looking at some other interesting statistics related to Pell. In our campus, the 2007 cohort adjusted gross income for students that got Pell who were dependent students, still dependent within their family for tax purposes and so on, was $27,000 and change. And in 2011, it actually went up to $31,000 because the eligibility, more people were able to go for Pell Grants. So in the independent students, the ones that are on their own, so to speak, also that jumped. So here's one that a lot of us, you've heard this, and most of you probably know this, but I just wanted to give you a little more detailed picture of it. This is the number of UW-Oshkosh Pell students who received awards with zero expected family contribution. So in 2007, there were 846 of them. In 2011, there were 1,726. Okay, so basically, for those of you that like words and not data tables, there's the, we'll call them, I guess, sociologists call them empirical generalizations. All right. Now, Pell eligibility percentage by race and cohort for UW-Oshkosh. This is what you saw today. We're starting to bore down into trying to find out what's happening here. And so we're back to those cohorts. And if you look at the student of color, which here what we're doing is just the percentage of students. These are not retention rates. These are percentage down. There were 83% of our white students were non-Pell eligible in 2007, 16.5%. And then half and half. Our students of color in 2007, 50% were Pell eligible, 50% not. Then look what happened. That shifted for the white students, went from 83% down to 74%, but now 25% Pell eligible. And look what happened to our students of color. Now 64, almost two-thirds of our students of color were Pell eligible. So you can see those obvious trends. And you can see, too, on the bottom, And this is something at UW-Oshkosh, and I think it has something to do with some of our struggles to do better with our retention rate. We had not been a very diverse institution, like a number of UWs, for very long. And so when we started our strategic planning in fall of 2000, we had about 438, if memory serves me right, students of color. Now we have almost 1,400. So we've more than tripled the number of students of color, but they're not doing as well. So when you look at these eligibility percentages, you see those changes, but these are the ends. They're on 120 because these, remember, are first-time students who return. So there's only 127 in 2007, 238 that came back in 2012. Okay, so now we're going back and looking at the retention rate by subgroup, and what you see here is very interesting. In 2007, the Pell white students were retaining at a rate higher than the non-white Pell students, 77% to 76%. The Pell students of color were retaining at a rate higher than the non-Pell students of color. Then you see these dramatic shifts, show up again. So just a kind of a example, the Pell students of color in the 2007 cohort retained almost 80%, went down to 61.3%. Okay, so here again, some summaries of all these tables. We've increased the degrees awarded, outpacing enrollment increases. Let me just kind of go through these, and I'll be repeating myself, just kind of going back to the bottom. So comparing the 2007 cohort to 2011, Pell-eligible white students increased, and then the rates of retention decreased. Pell-eligible students of color also increased. However, the rate of retention decreased more than 4 times the white Pell students. And both non-Pell white students and students of color retention rates improved. Okay, so what's the strategy? A lot of the things you've heard that a number of our colleague institutions are doing, early alert programs, and we share, we talk to each other a lot. We go to a lot of the same national meetings. Vicki does a good job keeping us aware of all the different things that are going on in Wisconsin and around the country. In fact, this recent publication is going to be very helpful because the focus is on programs that have shown results and programs that show promise. So it's very important for us to keep very open about this, very transparent. It's hard to chew these kind of brutal facts, but you can't do anything about them if you don't acknowledge you have them in your academic community. So you'll notice too in the inclusive excellence, which I would consider a macro level way of evaluating a macro level strategy, because if you go to the slide that Mark had on the inclusive excellence guiding principles, you will see what we're doing for the University Studies program is an inclusive excellence strategy. It's core to the mission. We're going right at the middle of where everything happens, and there's widespread engagement throughout the entire campus. There's close attention to students, all students. There's joint pursuit of diversity and excellence. There's implementation matters such as strategy, which we'll be talking about in a moment. And there's a dual focus. It's not just about the students of color. It's about all the students. So in this strategy to deal with this challenge then, and the provost has gone over this with you, some details, so I'll spare you of that, and he gave the handout that he used the last time he talked with you about the transformation of our general education program. So what the thing we want to just kind of talk a little bit about that. So what is it about what we're doing that's distinctive enough that we have such great confidence that it's going to help us improve overall student success and close achievement gaps? Remember, first and foremost, it's macro. Okay, it's built on better teaching, better learning, greater expectations from students that they demonstrate their mastery. And now it's clear what we mean by that. It wasn't always clear what the faculty meant by a well-educated person. We had lots of conversations to agree to the essential learning outcomes. The students will be using e-portfolios and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of the big question, what makes the program distinctive, such as educational quality success, all students improves and achievement gaps close. There's the last slide in the Provost's PowerPoint. All these things that our faculty and staff are committed to, you can find 1, 2 of them, or maybe 3 of them with some other institutions that are transforming, but you don't find them all. And that's going to be the challenge for us, because we know all of these things will result in a better education, and the bottom line, a better engagement of all students in a more personal way. I mean, I was very impressed, Renee, with UW Superior in terms of what you've been able to accomplish, you know, and you've made the point, well, one of our advantages is that we're small, we better do that well and take a good example of that, and you've got those gaps closed, you know, because you can really give them that very close attention, a lot of one-on-one experience, and when you get to a bigger institution, you're trying to do the same thing, so you have to use different strategies for that. So here, when you go down to the engagement thing, we're training peer mentors, student ambassadors, to work with our incoming students to help them go through and succeed and successfully, so to speak, navigate this new and very exciting general education program. We have community engagement projects. Every student will have to get a community engagement project with a social service agency or a not-for-profit in the region as part of their education. We're training those people on what we're trying to do and how we want that experience to help our students better master the essential learning outcomes. So there's another, what we're trying to do is put a team of people around each and every student as they come into the institution. The same thing with alumni mentors. We have alums volunteering out of the woodwork to come help us with this program and deliver the program. So you see what the faculty have done here is they've opened up. They said, we just can't do it all. And it's not just about smaller classes, but we're going to have some smaller classes and so on. It's about getting others, about taking advantage of others, other students to help teach students, other alums to help teach students, members of the community to help teach our students in a focused way towards our objective. So those are some of the things I think show a lot of promise for meeting that challenge. So next challenge, and I'll go faster these last two, affordability of college. This is another huge challenge, just to kind of put it out there. In fall 2000, when I arrived on campus, the total student cost for a resident Wisconsin student was $6,858. Now it's $15,284, 120-some-3% increase. This is a huge issue. In a time when people need more, have less to invest in their future, the subsidized price of a college education is going up. So what's the strategy? Developing a stakeholder scorecard. We've got to quit throwing each other under the bus. The internal stakeholders, such as the administration, the faculty, and the staff, they have a role. The external stakeholders, the state, the federal government, donors, they have a role. And we're not going to get anywhere with this affordability challenge if we keep trying to blame one, trying to blame the other. So in an article I wrote on this, the basic point I was trying to make was that we, as the keepers of the cost, the faculty and administrators, we're first and foremost responsible for the cost and the quality of delivering education. This makes us very important, but clearly secondary drivers are the final subsidized price a student has to pay. Conversely, the students themselves and how they choose to behavior and what things they do to help invest in their future, and the federal, state, and donor price subsidizers are most responsible for the price paid and the student investment loan debt incurred. That makes them very important, but a secondary driver of quality and cost. All right, so we all can do that. We all have to do it together. Okay, last one, competitive compensation, support for development of faculty and staff. We have the assistant president on the front page of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel telling the truth. I mean, look at that meter. It almost went off, Kevin. I mean, that's how truthful. Right? So this is a watershed moment. Whether we're able to do anything about it is another thing, but I think we've got as many people now that really understand how much of a challenge this is for us. So we all upset our part of the state, the Gannett newspapers are what we pay. I got to tell you, we're a little ambivalent about what they did, but nonetheless, they basically, UW Salaries Trail Pierce, our own commission that was convened with mostly private sector people on it, the same alarm bell. Okay, so what's the strategy here? Well, it's not rocket science. Increased compensation funding priority and decentralized pay fund authority. We need to have the external stakeholders funding for compensation, professional development support. We just need to get better reinvestment so we can do the right thing in making our compensation competitive for outstanding faculty and staff in the UW system institution. We, the internal stakeholder reallocation funding priority for compensation, must increase. What that means is, to the extent we reallocate resources, we've got to put more of it toward making our salaries more competitive, toward providing more professional support and development programs. You know, as educational institutions, we don't put anywhere near the percentage of our resources for the ongoing growth and professional development of our workforce that the private sector does. All right? So we've got to figure out how to do that, and we are. A number of us are doing some things, and you'll hear about some more things that Oshkosh is doing over the next several months in this area. Decentralized pay plan authority, accountability of order Regents UW institution. Again, we're the only set of institutions in the country whose pay plan is set and determined beyond its board of regents. The only set of institutions in the country. And that's been going on for decades. All right? Why is that a problem? Well, because they set the pay plan for all state employees. And that pay plan, over the years, has been set, driven mostly by maybe statewide and local market conditions. And many of our faculty and academic staff have, at least Midwest U.S., if not international markets. So it's not rocket science to figure out why we kept slipping behind when your pay plan is set in the context of a local market when you have a national, if not international market for your talent. Furthermore, that takes pressure off people like me when I don't have to really struggle that mightily with trying to figure out how to get the pay plan, the compensation better. Right? And I always use this example, and for those of you who heard it too much, I apologize, but when I was provost in Indiana State for 7 years, we had our own pay plan authority, right? So when we would make decisions, when we'd allocate or reallocate to our priorities, as provost, I would be popular with the deans and the department chairs when I replaced more position openings. I didn't sweep the money and put it someplace. But very unpopular with the faculty senate and academic senate leaders. When I go the other way, I'd be unpopular with them. It was very uncomfortable being provost, but not UW-Oshkosh, right? But, you know, so what that did is it takes you out of the position of having to struggle with this. Now, a little interesting thing about my former institution, which I have great admiration for, they had maybe 100 more faculty than they should because they were behind too. And they opted for hiring more and more people. So even when you have the authority, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to use it properly, right? So we don't experience that here in the UW system, and we haven't for years. And we keep saying, oh, the state and the governor and legislature has got to fund the pay plan, fund the pay plan. You know, so the faculty are behind us. They're not trying to get angry at me that much because I don't really control the pay plan. All right, so what we're asking, we watch out what we ask for, but quite frankly, we're not going to do anything about this problem unless we get that type of authority. Okay, so we're back where we started. If our number one core priority is a better education, then we need to make sure that we provide those educating them, and doing so, I might add, in a very innovative way. These have been extraordinarily hard times for our faculty and staff to do what they do. The maximum opportunity to sell. This means helping them grow. It means, like it or not, we have to compensate them fairly and competitively. I guess we can now eat. No one has any questions.
Wait,
I'm sure.
maybe
It's such a great presentation
for you. Maybe anybody has some questions or comments for Chancellor Wells? Mark.
Chancellor Wells, one of your slides, you made there's a quote from you or from your report about how who's primarily and who's secondary responsible for cost versus
subsidized price.
Yeah, subsidized price. You know, there are some people in the academic community who are out there writing books very critical of the cost, and would disagree with your statement, I think, and say that the primary problem is that the cost hasn't been controlled, as opposed to, acknowledging that state or public education, the subsidization has declined, but that the primary problem is our failure to control costs.
Yeah, and then what we do is we turn around and try to distract ourselves from that and go in and say, no, the primary reason, you're just not funding us properly. So if you're in a position where you want to defend what the state and federal elected officials are investing in higher education, and it's tough times and so on, and it would be normal for you to think, well, the problem here is the costs are out of control, so I'm just going to throw the universities under the bus and say it's your problem. You're not containing costs. Then we turn around internally and say, well, you know how hard it is to do what we do, where the budget's been cut and we don't have enough, and the problem is you guys and gals aren't funding us properly. So my point simply is, we're both right. And so in my, now whatever, 30-some years of doing all this, I've never seen the trust and confidence between the internal and external stakeholder groups at such a low level. And that's the first thing. We got to make peace on this, and it's still hard, and that type of thing. But we do need to do a better job with cost containment, and I dare say we've had to, whether we want to or not. And we can still probably do better. But there still has to be greater priority given in terms of the public investment in public education, which is the most fundamental thing that makes this country distinctive, our commitment to public education and giving people a chance and an opportunity to excel and succeed. That means we got this whole sense that there's more privatization going on and disinvestment in public good things such as education, that we're asking for more authority, more ability, flexibility to do what we do, and we're getting it. Meanwhile, they're going around us. They're bringing in private sector competitors. They're letting, I won't name states, but some states bringing in Western Governors University and letting them qualify for state financial aid dollars. What's that all about? I mean, so this whole need for us to, quit the throwing of each other in the bus and say we all have a major role and responsibility to get this fixed. And if we can start showing, which I think we try to do, the good faith we're doing to contain costs, to be innovative and creative, whether it's the flex degree or other things that we've been doing on campus, what I expect back for that is some good faith. And I expect the investor to say, okay, we're going to get more back on our investment, and we need to give you guys a higher priority. That's going to make me feel better, and we'll be able to then say, hey, we got to keep working on this cost containment thing because they're working on their side. Right? It's a team thing. If you want to use a football analogy, if you got the team, the first thing you know about losing teams is what? Well, at some point in the game, the first quarter or whatever, you start seeing them fight and arguing with each other. And if you're on the other side in your head, you're happy because they're beaten, or they're looking at the score all the time. They're beaten, right? So if you think of it that way, we really have a responsibility to be a team on behalf of the public good interest of the citizens of Wisconsin and of the country, right? So we shouldn't be bickering with each other. That's making us losers. In the end, all of us. I'm sorry, I'm getting preachy.
Regent Whitford. While you were gone, by the way, Regent Whitford, you got credit for all the good things that have happened in Oshkosh, University of Oshkosh. You were gone for that part. When you were a freshman. So watch what you ask.
I'll tell you later.
Watch the question you ask.
Don't believe anything any of the rest of them say.
What was that? In follow-up to what Regent Bradley said, and also in follow-up to your earlier energetic comment with regard to our being unrealistic if we get too carried away with looking to 4 years to degree. I'm thinking back to 2 meetings ago, and I think you were here when our economist friend from Georgetown stressed that aside from health care, we're in the space here together where we have greater inefficiency than in any other space in the economy. So as you think of the data that you share with us and look forward in your strategic plan, do we have adequate emphasis on and did you buy into what you heard from that economist? and how do you think about
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't have to wait for some retired, or for a Georgetown professor, to tell us that we have some significant efficiencies to deal with. I think we've been aware of that for, maybe we started waking up 10 years or so ago. And as I said earlier, you have a choice when your investors can't continue the level of investment with you for whatever reason, right? You either moan and complain and cry about it and let everything go to heck, or you start figuring out how to create greater efficiencies and funding to your priorities, and you start figuring out how to leverage whatever flexibility you can create in your budget. And again, in the Ready Committee this afternoon, we'll show you some of the things that we've done there. So one of the ways to get greater efficiencies is to be able to have innovation fund investment, right, in things that people want to do that are not only going to improve the efficiency, but also the effectiveness of what it is that we do. And so what we've been able to do at UW-Oshkosh is develop funding sources to fund innovation and creativity that I believe has led to greater efficiencies and effectiveness, but it's brought Regent Whitburn additional resources to the table that are non-traditional, like the slide, $45 million in capital improvements that are giving our students great educational experience. You heard about this in biodigesters and hotel and convention center and so on and so forth. Donor $5 million, the donor that we raised for the new Sage Hall. Those type, when faculty and staff see that come, then you can incent them in ways that So I guess what I'm saying, you can't just talk about the need to do it because you need to create greater efficiencies. You got to double challenge them that it also has to lead to greater effectiveness. And if we do that, we'll get more resources, more investment in this, more trust and confidence, so we can continue to do what it is we're passionate about.
Thank you, Chancellor Wells, very much.
Thank you.
It is time for lunch. I think we'll still plan on those committee meetings starting at 1 o'clock.